Yes, I actually survived 1,000 days in Minecraft Hardcore. To celebrate, I'm uploading the whole film here again, i.e. from the very first day to 1,000. You can now see everything I experienced. Feel free to watch the video to fall asleep or while you're doing homework, for example. Oh yeah, don't be surprised. The quality is very bad at the beginning, but the longer you watch the video, the better it gets. Have fun. Well, the first day started, and I immediately started dismantling wood with the hand, but I had no other option. The first workbench was right there, and I first made an axe to collect some more wood, which I then used to craft a sword and a pickaxe. Since I knew that it's easy to lose food in Hardcore Ode, I took care of it straight away. A few fish had to suffer, and I suffered my first loss because I was under for too long remained water. I excavated my initial stone from a cliff and utilized it to construct a furnace where I cooked my inaugural meal. Utilizing the leftover stone, I fashioned both a mining pick and a blade and swiftly achieved my subsequent milestone. I then made the choice to extract an increased quantity of coal and stone. Then I looked around a bit and discovered sugarcane, which I took straight away. Unfortunately, when I saw the sheep, I had to kill them. In this case, the wool for my bed was more important to me. I really liked this little island on this lake that I discovered, and I knew immediately that I wanted to stay here. So I cut down all the trees that were on it and watched the sunset for a moment, but not for so long because it was nighttime. And the monsters in Hardcore are, well, hardcore. That's why I dug underground and built myself a small shelter. Very needy, but that's how I survived the first day in my world. The next morning, I enlarged my bunker and found a lava lake, which I built up as a precaution, because you never know what can happen. I found my first iron, which I put straight into the oven and used to craft my first iron pickaxe. Shortly afterwards, I discovered my first cave, which I explored straight away. I found more iron, coal, some gold, and this extremely cute axolotl, which unfortunately I haven't been able to capture yet. When I got back to the top, I leveled my little island and lit it up. That was the end of day 2, and just before I went to sleep, I made myself some armor. Day 3, I decided to go back into the cave and explore further. But then my first opponent awaited me, a zombie. I turned it off pretty easily and meanly, but the next ones were already waiting to give me a bit of a hard time. In the cave, I found a lot of iron and my first copper, although I'm not sure what I could actually use it for, but whatever. There they were, my very first creepers as opponents, with no chance against the water. A short time later, however, I saw another 2 that I had defeated with skillful fighting skills. Shortly afterwards, also the third. Surprisingly, there were just 2 glowing ink bags on the floor, which of course I didn't say no to. And here they were, my first diamonds, which I used to craft a pointed bag. I came back with over 1.5 stacks of iron and over 20 gold. I grew my sugarcane and some wheat. I made the remaining iron armor and tools. After that, I made a small cage for cows so that I can breed cows without them running away from me. I then expanded my shelter a bit so I could finally call it home. And I have to say, it doesn't even look that bad, at least for my standards. In the meantime, I also brought cows into my cage because it would make a lot of sense without them, and my first cow Bibi was already there. But let's continue with the base. Before I knew it, it was already day 9, and I was harvesting my sugarcane. Then I found this llama, and we immediately became best friends. It was my perfect new friend, but unfortunately I didn't have a saddle or a leash, so nothing came of us. I got more cows for this, and oh boy, it was completely nerve-wracking and took what felt like an eternity. Plus, it was getting dark, and it was even more difficult. However, I finally managed it and slept like a baby. On the 10th day, it seemed as though all I managed to do was to straighten up a few things and take a brief glance around the area close by. Then, on the 11th day, I dedicated my time to maintaining the wheat crops, and I constructed a mystical table for myself, believing that it would elevate my abilities to a higher tier. Following that, I bewitched my iron mining tools, preparing the stage for my mining endeavors to commence. I went to Diamond Height and braced myself for a long tour where I will hopefully find some diamonds. Over the next few days, I dug miles of tunnels and, well, what can you say about that? It just wasn't all that exciting. I actually found some diamonds as well as a lot of iron, gold, lapis, and redstone. Then on the 5th day, I accidentally crafted a diamond pickaxe. And yes, I know I'm pretty stupid. The next day, I went into a ravine fairly close to my base and scraped off the iron and much-needed coal. Afterwards, I explored some more and found a desert where a lot of monsters were waiting for me. I was trying to get a record, which is obtained by managing to have a skeleton kill a creeper. With a bit of skill, I managed it, but I had to be very careful not to die myself. I was very happy that I survived that night. Day 17 was very relaxed. I increased my cows again and looked around the area again and collected some leather because my next target was a full enchanter. And for that, I needed 15 bookshelves, or 45 books, or 45 leather. So a lot of leather. It was day 18, and I decided to go on a trip. My main goal was actually to farm leather for the full enchanter. However, I then saw a sea and decided to look for sunken ships. After only taking a boat for about 2 minutes out to sea, I discovered this, an amethyst diode. I immediately mined a few blocks and amethyst buds, and the journey continued. I almost couldn't believe my eyes when I sat in the ship in front of this new biome. A mycelial biome? The best thing that could have happened to me. Countless mushroom cows that drop leather. Oh, and the biome itself is, of course, extremely cool, and I'm pretty lucky to have it close to me. After a few chopped cows and enough leather later, I also found sunken ships, and in them a treasure map that I saved for later because my inventory was already quite large, full. And here I was driving along towards the sunset, which was pretty cool. On the way home, I discovered this kind of ruin where a drowned man was waiting for me. After being thrown by a spear that was already doing quite a bit of damage to me, I just kept throwing more. I spent the entire 22-day building a place for my magic table, and here it was, the full enchanter. Now I could do level 30 enchantment, and I knew that once I got that, I wouldn't be far away from the Ender Dragon fight. But before I could do the awesome enchantments, I definitely needed enough XP. So I went underground again, got enough obsidian, and I was ready for the Nether. Unfortunately, the spawn was far from ideal, but I had to live with it. So I just built myself straight in one direction, and boom, I came out right at a fortress. But since I only had iron armor, I had to be extremely careful, and my primary goal was initially just to get XP. Then I did that too. The first thing I wanted to do was upgrade my pickaxe, and I got the enchantment I wanted. I enchanted the second diamond pickaxe to efficiency 2 because I didn't have the levels for the 30R enchantment. With the new Lucky 3 pickaxe, I decided to get more diamonds in order to get closer to my diamond armor, and with it, the Ender Dragon. My haul was enormous, over half a stack of diamonds and an extremely large amount of gold, iron, and lapis. I made my diamond armor, felt very powerful with it for a moment, but I didn't want to damage it yet, so I temporarily stored it at the armor stand. I also made myself a diamond sword and saw what enchantments I could get on it, and unfortunately there weren't any good ones. When I unsuspectingly wanted to farm my sugarcane on 31 day, I was surprised by these 2 creepers who were waiting for me on my roof. I still took care of my wheat field and increased my cows again. Afterwards, I enchanted my sword with luck, and the result is fine, I would say. I expanded my cow farm, and then the day came to an end again. I decided to go back into the nether and explore the fortress. I found a lot of saddles, took a few nether warts to brew, encountered some wither skeletons, and found this blade spawner where I farmed some reward rods. This meant that I could now only brew potions and craft changes. So I was getting closer and closer to my first goal. Back in the upper world, I also made myself a bridal table. Although I had farmed enough pay reds, I didn't have any change beads for change eyes yet, so I decided to trade my gold with a piglin in hopes of getting enough change pearls for the end. After not getting a single ender pearl from half the stack of gold, I went back home and enchanted my helmet, which was also somewhat of a disappointment. Since I didn't get any ender pearls before, I took another 1.5 stacks of gold with me and hoped for better luck this time, which, well, see for yourself, turned out rather semi-utically. Just by the way, the probability of getting ender pearl in a trade is 473. So, with my 126 gold, I should be able to expect almost 6 enderburn times. I only got enderburn once instead, which is a 1/4 probability. So I was extremely unlucky when it came to trading with the piglin. That's why the piglin had to suffer a little more. On the morning of 37 day, I decided to go treasure hunting. I hadn't brought too much food with me, so I had to hurry. Before that, I stopped by this ruin and got a fishing rod with luck of the sea too. But the journey continues. So here I had arrived. Now all I had to do was dig up the treasure more, which took a while, I have to say. Eventually I found it, and inside was a few diamonds and a heart of the sea. But then it got dark, and I made my way home again. I wanted to relax a bit on the 38th day, and so I did some fishing in my lake. I also got a pretty awesome enchanted book. When night fell, I looked at the rest of my loot, and yes, there were 2 really cool bows there too. The 39 day started really well. I enchanted my breastplate and got the best enchantment I could ask for. I made myself an arm boss and repaired my pickaxe, which was already suffering a bit. Afterwards, I went back into the nether and headed straight in a direction again, hoping to get out somewhere where there was more quartz for XP. I ended up coming out at another fortress, where I still took all the quartz. I explored the fortress and had to fight some wither skeletons. When I got back to level 30, I went back and enchanted my pants, whose enchantment I'm relatively happy with. So the only thing missing was the shoes to fully enchant my armor. I also enchanted a pickaxe with efficiency 2 and luck 1, which I then used to farm XP. After grinding my way back up to level 30, I enchanted my last piece of armor, my shoes. I got a very good enchantment with protection 4 and durability 3. I then also upgraded my pants to plot 4 and my armor was ready for the Ender Drain fight. I just needed the Ender Eyes more and I was missing the Ender Pearls. On 41 day, I got some wood with my new axe because wood was becoming scarce for me. I combined my bow, which then really became a power. Since I wanted to have a horse all the time, I went traveling again and got this beautiful black horse, which I rode around for a while. I fought countless Endermen with him that night because I wanted to finally defeat the Ender Drake, and I still needed Enderberries to do so. I found villagers Darkseeber and took potatoes and melon with me that I hadn't had yet. After 2 nights of just Enderman farming, my haul was 12 Ender Pearls, so I now had a total of 14, and went straight to making ender eyes. In preparation for the ender dragon, I wanted to pick up a few potions, including healing, soft fall, and strength. Also, I thought that if I took a potion of invisibility that no enderman would attack me. And, well, sometimes I'm really not the brightest. When I looked outside during the brown, I saw the following. A troop of pilgrims. Just like that, I took them out one by one with my extremely powerful bow. But the victory also had a dark side. I was cursed, with a bad omen. While I was waiting for phantoms, I used the time to build a long staircase to diamond level. Then I fought a few phantoms and brewed my final potions, that of the gentle fall. Here he was. Day 48, I fully equipped myself and began the search for the final portal. I cast my ender eyes in the air and was ready for the adventure. On the way there, I came near a village, and I thought about whether I should do the raid. I chose this because I was hoping for a totem that would make the ender dragon fight a little easier for me, but quite often it was pretty close, and I almost died several times. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to protect the villagers from the invaders, but I did get 3 totems. However, my helmet was badly damaged, and I knew it would break at any time. But that didn't stop me, and I found the stronghold near the village. It took me a while to find the portal, but here I was standing in front of it and activating it. I checked my helmet again, which didn't look good at all, but then I jumped in and this happened. I was completely frightened and thought that it was over here. Thank God that was just a bug, and I now concentrated on the fight. I drank my potions and made my way over. Then I started destroying the crystals so I couldn't heal the ender dragon anymore. I collected the dragon's breath and realized that I no longer had any healing, so I had to be even more careful because I now suffered even more damage. After all the crystals were destroyed, there was nothing left between me and the ender dragon, and the first thing I did was engage in close combat. In between, I shot at him with my extremely strong bow, which caused him some damage. When I went into close combat again, he threw me away, but luckily I had drunk my potions. The fight was coming to an end, and I fired my final shot. I collected tons of XP, but I still didn't have enough, so I went to the end city, where I soon realized that I had no more blocks or food. I jumped back into the portal and was happy that I had completed my first goal. Back home, I was happy to see my cows again and fed them plenty. I was very proud to place the banners I won in the raid in my crypt. Of course, I had to complete my armor again, and this time I even got a slightly better enchantment on my helmet. I also got my dream pickaxe and made myself a new pair of shoes, which were really nice. I then put my only mending book on the pickaxe, and it was perfect. On 55 day, I prepared for a second trip to Envor because I really wanted to box an elytra and shulker. With some potions, and this time with enough food and blocks, I made my way back to the end. I looked for the N80 for ages, and was extremely happy when I saw one. Only this one didn't have a ship with an elytra, which was very sobering. I still got some shulker boxes and the loot. I then looked again for a few days for the second N80, but to my relief, this one was on a ship. There I also took some loot with me and wrote myself the elytra, which should now make moving around the world a lot easier. Then I headed back home. When I got home, I made shulker boxes straight away, and here he was. The ender drain head, right above my bed. Half of my armor was extremely damaged, and so I decided to get a few mending books, which I used for the next few days. The following also happened during the train. The iron golem just jumped in here and did massive damage. I really thought it was over now, but luckily I escaped somehow. Afterwards, of course, the golem had to suffer. After a lot of trading, I acquired a few books and put them directly on my equipment. From now on, I no longer had to worry about something breaking, as things enchanted with mending repair themselves with XP. On the 70th day, a troop of pillagers awaited me again, and I killed them one by one and got the bad omen again. This meant I could start another raid, which I did the next day. I rang the bell so the residents knew and could go to safety, and then the raid started. I thought I had everything under control, but strangely enough, all the villagers died and I lost another raid. Since I wanted to get closer to my goal of killing the Wither, I went back to the village in the desert and tried to get a trade for a looting book. When I finally got the opportunity to buy a looting one book, I still needed some maractum, so I traded countless sticks with an arrow maker. After I picked up my last book, I headed back home and started combining the books. When I ran out of levels, I farmed coal and even found diamonds. And diamonds are always cool, no matter what equipment you already have. So I made the looting 3 book and now had to put it on my sword. So I went coal farming again. And then I did it. I put Luden 3 on my sword, and now the Witherhead farming could begin. But before I did that, I went and repaired my axe. I wanted to collect enough wood for my building project, and as a bonus, I got a lot of black powder that I used for rockets. Since I had built relatively little in my world, I wanted to let my creativity run wild. So I first started to enlarge the area of my little island, and then I built a bridge to the stable, which I then built. I also made a small area for potatoes, carrots, and wheat, and connected it to my island, which then ceased to be an island. My horse also got a little place to relax. On the 89th day, I was relatively happy with my base, but I wasn't finished yet. I still had 2 goals ahead of me: farm full netherite armor and defeat the Wither. So it was time to tackle these 2 goals. I went into the nether and tried to get Wither heads, which also took some time. I came back with 4 heads, so I only had 1 in reserve. But before I could complete my 3rd goal, I wanted to complete my 2nd goal first, farming the full netherite armor. So I needed fire resistance potions and netherite farming could begin. But before I went into the nether, I brought sheep into my new stable to get wool and beds. While I waited to increase the number of sheep, I started another raid, my 3rd in number. This time I really wanted to win, so I tried even harder. This time too, it was often close, and a dead man had to be used because of a creeper. After a long battle, there was only 1 opponent left that I couldn't find anywhere. I searched for a really long time until I finally found him in this cave. I got the hero of the village effect for protecting the village, even though I couldn't find a single villager anymore. After I got some wool and made a few beds out of it, I went into the nether. I didn't have much time left, so I tried to hurry up. So now with my beds and my efficient 4-diamond pickaxe, I went looking for ancient debris. After days of farming, I came back with a haul of 25 ancient debris, which I still had to smelt and then craft into netherite with gold. In the end, 6 netherite came out, and I decided to complete my 2nd goal of having full netherite armor and upgrade my sword and pickaxe. So here I stood with my netherite armor and got the achievement. On 99th day, I prepared for my final goal, defeating the Wither. I made enough arrows and equipped myself with healing and strength potions. Then it was time. The 100 tag Prahan and I was ready for the Wither. A little further away from my base, I built myself underground, and here I summoned him, the Wither. My final task of the 100 days. I drank my strength potion and shot him with my bow and arrow. When he stopped taking long-range damage, I went into melee combat, and the final boss went down quicker than I thought. With the nether star in the pastry, I returned to my base and watched the sunset on my horse. That was it. I survived 100 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. So here we are again, day 101 in my base. The first thing I wanted to do was craft a beacon, which I did, and looked for an epic place to put it, and then placed it here. I then harvested my wheat fields and used them to feed my cows and sheep. Next, I prepared for my above adventure. I wanted to have a villager farm with me, so I had to get villager into my base too. I made some splints and slept again before the trip started. The next day I had a small battle with 2 Endermen, but then I equipped my elytra and started searching for villagers. But only briefly, because I realized I had forgotten a bed, so I quickly made one. At the beginning, I looked in the villages I knew to see if there were 1 or 2 residents left of the lost wraiths, but I hadn't found any souls. I flew on, hoping to find a village soon, but in vain. Instead, I found a portal ruin, but there wasn't any really cool loot there. I still got the gold and continued looking. Vain. In addition, my elytra lost its durability during the flight, and I was completely frightened and thought I was dead. But thank God I had feather falling on my shoes and would have still had a totem in my hand anyway. Now I had ended up somewhere far away from my base and without elytra. So I headed home again. So far, this trip has been pure chaos. When I got home, I tried to recharge my elytra with mending, which would have taken a little too long with my ovens, so I went to the Nether to get XP. But there was also something positive about not finding any villagers on my first trip. I didn't have a minecart with me. On the 104 day, I flew off with full elytra and a minecart. It took some time, but I finally found a village. The next challenge was to transport the villagers to my home, so I had to put her in the minecart, which was a total hassle. Day 145. Now I had finally managed to put 2 villagers in the minecarts, and the most strenuous journey for these 2 villagers began. After a fairly short time, I also realized that perhaps I should have taken a few more rails with me, so that everything could be a little more relaxed and shorter. But I didn't want to fly back again now. This task took forever and was relatively unspectacular until one morning when a troop of pillagers showed up. I definitely wanted to avoid a fight with them so that my villagers would stay out of danger, and I was really lucky that they didn't attack me. I didn't want to lay a track through the forest, so the journey continued in the air. In between, I also had to get blocks because it was still quite a long distance. I finally arrived at my home on 110 day with 2 uninjured villagers and was extremely relieved that I had finally made it. Next, I had to find a place for the villagers, and I decided to build a villager farm right in my base. First, I cleared a small room for the villagers and brought them downstairs. Of course, I wanted to start breeding the villagers right away, so I crafted some scissors, got some wool, and made a few beds with it. The villagers were finally allowed to get out of the minecarts, and I got some potatoes and then gave them to my new roommate to make some children. Next, I set myself the task of making a nice place for my villagers. So I started hollowing out a large room. On 113 day, I finished it, and I already had an idea of how to build and design this room. So I went into the Nether and got some crimson wood and a lot of shroom lights. I chose blackstone as the floor, so I started with that first. But I quickly realized that I didn't have enough blackstone by far, and so I went into the Nether again. When I got to the Nether, I wanted to have some action, so I tried to capture this bastion. With my extremely good aim, I took out one opponent after the other with my bow and arrow, and when I entered the bastion, I already got my achievement. In the very first box, for which I had to kill a few enemies, I got a piece of ancient debris. I further inquired about the fortress for good loot and had to fight a lot of enemies. Every now and then, I would get some pretty good loot and even a second piece of ancient debris. At one point, it was pretty close, but of course I survived with my extremely good armor. Once I was done looting, I took care of why I went to the Nether in the first place. I got a ton of blackstone. Back in the overworld, I finished the floor of the villager farm and started building the walls, and I have to say that I really like them. Unfortunately, we ran out of shroom lights, and I had to go back to the Nether, where I had to get warped wood for the villager farm anyway. On 118 day, I arrived back home and started building the middle and final parts of the villager farm. Of course, I ran out of wood again in the meantime, and so I felled 1 or 2 oak trees. Ultimately, the part with the oak wood was supposed to be there so that I could lock the best villagers with a calling between the pillars, so to speak, and thus easily trade with them. As an accent in the first compartment, I decided on acacia wood, and I wanted to make the ceiling with smooth stone, which took a while with a few ovens, but I did it straight away. The ceiling lighting was still missing, so I crafted chains and lanterns and then held them up on the ceiling. There were also 1 or 2 power lights in the middle, where I was missing exactly one at the end. I continued with the last side of the room, where of course, knowing me, I ran out of acacia wood. So I made my way to a savanna, where I also took some black powder with me. Then I realized that I needed glowstone, so I quickly went to get it, and then took some power lights with me. The areas for the individual villagers were now ready, so next I built the stairs, which are not so spectacular now. Next I had to do some cleaning. I removed the flying highway I had built for the villagers. I crafted some beds, which I then set up in the third compartment of the villager farm so that I had enough space for offspring. On 125 day, I decided to build a smelter room where smoking ovens, melting ovens, and normal ovens would go. For the room itself, I only used stone bricks, which I think fits very well. A guest came by briefly while we were building, but I quickly got rid of him. In total, there were 18 melting ovens, as well as 18 smokers and 15 normal ovens in the room. So from now on, I certainly had enough ovens. Next, I wanted to go after my first target, the full beacon. So I scraped together all my gold and iron, but then realized that I was still missing a few blocks for my full beacon. So I had to farm a lot of iron, but before I did that, I went into the nether again and repaired my pickaxe for it. And of course, I took all the quartz with me as a bonus. Day 128. I was back in the upper world and prepared for my mining tour with enough torches and food. I looked for a cave for a while, but when I found one, it was so huge and complex that I farmed my entire inventory there for the next 2 days. I came back with a lot of resources, but I still had far too little for full peaking, so I had to do a second mining tour, which I started on the morning of 130 day with a shulker box. This time, it was a bit more exciting because I came across a mine. I was extremely motivated to explore this and hopefully threatened to take 1 or 2 cool items with me from Minecraft. I definitely thought it was a cool thing. And these were diamonds. 11 of them. Otherwise, I didn't really have any luck with drones because I only found one anyway, and it didn't have any of the mega stuff in it. Otherwise, I explored the entire mine shaft and found a poison spider spawner, which I'll definitely remember the coordinates of in case I could use it for something at some point. Of course, with the shulker box, I was able to take a lot more with me than before, and I only stopped using mine. It was a really long tour that lasted a total of 6 days and nights. I was all the happier to be back home and finally reach my first goal of completing the full beacon. I really had an excessive amount of iron, gold, and coal, which I hope I won't run out of in the near future. I packed all the pig iron and raw gold into all the furnaces that were still full of the loot from the last mining tour and waited until it was all melted. And then I could craft iron blocks. Now, I definitely had enough for the full beacon. I couldn't just put the beacon anywhere, so I wanted to build some kind of platform for it. So I got some soil and built up some of the lake so that I had more space to build on. For the platform, I needed some stone bricks, so I used my smelting room and melted some cleansestone. So I started building the platform on which the full beacon would stand. Of course, it's not extremely creative, but I think the end product looks okay. So here I stood and proudly placed my beacon and got my 2 achievements. I chose speed 2 straight away, but I didn't like it and changed it to regeneration and resistance a short time later. I'm in a hardcore world here, and the only thing I don't want is to die. I then beautified the platform a little, and then day 137 was over. The next task I set myself was to grow a large field for potatoes and wheat so that I could feed the villagers enough. So I had to make a big straight area, and I didn't want to do it with my inefficient shovel. So I enchanted a new diamond shovel and combined them together. The felling of the countless trees and the clearing of a large area began. Of course, I knew there was also an achievement for a certain scythe, so I looked it up and found this. Serious dedication. I needed to craft a netherite hoe, so I looked to see if I still had enough netherite scrap, which of course I didn't. I needed exactly 1 more. So I headed into the nether and looked for a piece of ancient debris. After a bit of searching, I found 3 of them and headed home again. When I got back home, another guest was waiting for me, but I didn't let him stay long. I smelted the ancient debris and made myself a netherite ingot and then upgraded my diamond hoe to a netherite hoe, and I got the achievement, Serious Dedication. Now it was time to apply the field, so I made a few buckets, filled them with water, and placed them at regular intervals. Then the planting of the potatoes and wheat seeds began. Here I was standing in front of my huge field, and the netherite field was already more than half demolished. With the new field, I was now able to take my potato and wheat production to the next level, and thus trade a lot of emeralds with my villager. Of course, I was aware that I would have to wait a bit before I could harvest, but I was already looking forward to the future Opet Usha raids with my colleagues in the cellar, who are of course with me on a voluntary basis. I wanted to grow melons, sugar, and pumpkin, so I looked for them in my extremely disorganized boxes. I didn't have too much of the stuff, but that's why I wanted to grow it here. I placed them right next to my main field, and then I thought about what to do next. I then decided to expand my building area a little, so I got some soil and then started building the lake. During the night, I ran out of dirt, and the monsters eventually became too annoying for me, so I called it a day. The next morning, I got some blocks again and continued where I left off last night. When I was finished, I wanted to finally dedicate myself to what I had wanted for a very long time, namely dogs. I searched for bones in my crates to no avail, so I used the night to farm some bones. In the meantime, I repaired my shovel, and 1 or 2 creepers blew up. A zombie illager suddenly came towards me, and at first I was worried whether it wasn't one of my villagers. I closed it up and wanted to go and see if there were any more zombie illagers in my basement. But then, a whole army of zombies came towards me, led by a creeper. With my extremely good PvP kills, I used the opponent's weapon to my own advantage. I was extremely relieved when I saw my Cubans still healthy in bed. I had collected enough bones during the night, and when I wanted to sort out my inventory, I of course found bones in my box. But no matter, the night wasn't wasted. I had completely repaired my shovel. So now I flew off enough bones and looked for a tiger, the biome in which dogs and wolves spawn. I found one relatively quickly, and now I just had to have better luck with the dogs. That went semi-well, but I found pumpkins, which I took with me, and I also took some beetroot with me. I almost gave up and wanted to look for a new tiger when I finally found my new best friend from afar. I was overjoyed, and a short time later, I found the second and then the third, with whom I made my way home. When I got home, the dogs supported me in fights against monsters, and I immediately saw that they were capable of fighting. The next day, I built a little cage for her, and unfortunately, I still don't know what to call her. So feel free to write me a few names for her in the comments. So that you and I have a better overview of my world, I wanted to make a map, but not just one, but 3. And each of them in a different size, i.e. on a different scale. Of course, this is a slightly more complex project, especially when you think about how big the largest map will be and how much land I would have to explore for it. But I imagined it to be extremely cool, and I think that it will also be relatively nice for you viewers I pretty much know what my world looks like. So I started building these kind of quartz pillars that my card would ultimately be on. I then crafted item frames and 1 or 2 compass. For maps, you need a compass and 8 pieces of paper, and that's why I farmed my sugarcane. I made my first few maps and realized that I would need a lot of paper for the project. But that didn't stop me from activating my first 2 cards, and when I put them on the wall, I realized that I had built the pillars to the west. But I wanted it to face north, and so I set it up somewhere else. Paper was in short supply for me, and I felt like I didn't have any sugarcane either, so I looked for it. I took some sugarcane with me, and I even found a village right on a ravine where there was even a flying house. I didn't find more than a few emeralds, bread, and apples, and on the way back, I came across a ruined portal where I definitely took the gold block with me. I crafted a few maps and now set out to explore and complete the first and therefore the smallest map. Thankfully, with the elytra, this went very quickly, and this time I was a little more aware of my surroundings than usual. Here it was, my world in the smallest record. Next, I wanted to tackle the next largest map, which is at a scale of 1 to 4. So I got some sugarcane, made paper out of it, and then a map table where I could reduce the size of the maps. I started to complete the first map, which took a while because my elytra broke again. So I harvested my potatoes and put them in the oven to gain experience. Then I went traveling again, but this time I had a map table with me, so I didn't have to fly home every time I fully explored a map. The exploration took a lot of time, and I managed to explore 4 more maps by the night of 150 day. That was it. I survived another 50 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. Friends of the sun, here we are again in my world. and a creeper greeted me right on 151 day. I said hello to my dogs and checked to see if my cows and sheep were still okay, which they obviously were. I didn't want to waste any time, and my next task was to zombify villagers so I could make extremely cheap trades with them. So I separated the villager farm compartments, made a piston, and so I transported the villagers' first compartment. The most annoying thing was that 2 villagins kept sitting down, and I had put them back in one at a time. So now I had my first few guinea pigs, and all I had to do was wait for the night and a zombie. So in the meantime, I prepared myself for the act of transformation. I needed 1 golden apple and 1 weakness potion per villager. For the weakening potion, I needed a fermented spider eye, and for that, I needed brown mushrooms, which I picked up nearby. I started to give free rein to my brewing skills, and now all I had to do was wait for the night, which was about to come, and I would get a zombie and then lure it into my basement. Then when I went up, I found a cat with me. Unfortunately, I didn't have any raw fish, otherwise I would have tamed them straight away. But what happened next? I went back downstairs to see if 1 or 2 zombie villagers were already waiting there. He was taken away by the golem, which isn't actually a bad thing. But at that moment, I was already very disappointed with Golem. After all, I don't mean anything bad about the village hunt. Golem, you monster. Now I had to lock the golem away and get a second zombie, but you just can't imagine what happened next. So I built barrier 1 higher and started my 3rd attempt. I realized that the villagers were just too fast for the zombie, so I started locking the villager and the zombie at the same time, which worked reasonably well. I then started the transformation straight away at the first zombie illager. While I was making a lectern for my first librarian, the zombie had done a good job and zombified the other 3 villagers too. Now it was time to transform the next ones, and then it happened. I became a zombie doctor. I tried to get the villager into its final position, which was a bit of a cramp, but then it worked. Then it was the second one and then the third one. Now it was time to get some awesome book trades. But I didn't think it would be so long. Put down the reading desk, hope for a good book, be disappointed, take down the reading desk again. Yes, that was actually all I did that day. At some point I got the first good trait, silk touch, or gentleness. Thank God I didn't have to wait so long for the second good trait, and I got efficiency 5 for just 11 emeralds. Then I also got mending for just 1 emerald again. The 4th villager took a long time again, but I got protection 3 for 6 emeralds. Now I already had 4 good trades, but I have room for 12 in total, so 8 were still missing. It was time again to prepare some kumbans for the ritual, and so I put them one by one in a boat. I had to wait a bit for the night, and so I decided to harvest my small fields first, and then my large field too. I was planning on having 1 or 2 farmers to trade with, so that I could be so rich and finance my OB expenses, and I thought so too. Not that harvesting alone would take almost a day. It wasn't until that night that I finished it, and suddenly a zombie illager came up to me as a politician, and I was really worried whether it wasn't one of me. I looked, but luckily everyone was still at the start, and I brought the zombie illager down to infect his brothers with his zombie plague, which worked very well, but somehow his zombie illager turned into a drowned man. And yes, I'm still wondering how that happened. Well, it doesn't matter. I now had 3 more villagers who will hopefully offer me cool things at extremely good prices. The next day, I harvested my sugarcane, my melons, my pumpkins, and then I spent ages trying to get a good book from the nearest villager. I got Unbreaking 2 and was very happy with it. Next, I wanted to have an armor smith and a toolsmith. At the end of the day, there was a creeper in my base, where I always have to be a little careful. Day 157. I still hadn't filled all the villager seats and was preparing for the next zombification. But then I realized that I was running out of villagers, and I had to lead 2 of them back into the 3rd compartment to ensure there were new ones. So I got potatoes and gave them to the villagers and waited for them to have children, where of course I wasn't watching. I also gave the other 2 potatoes in the hope that their children would grow up before nightfall, which is illogical, but I don't know. I never paid attention in biology class. Strangely enough, I didn't have any children, and so I got the next zombie. Got 2 new zombie illagers, which I also transformed straight away. On 158th day, I harvested and expanded the sugarcane, pumpkin, and melon farm, because one thing I really want to be in this hardcore world, and that is rich. Get rich with emeralds. When the transformation of the 2 villagers was finished, I made them a stonemason and a weaponsmith. Now there were only 3 spaces left, and so I prepared everything again and expanded my farms again. I got the zombie, and yes, I think you know what happened next. One then became a tanner, and the other became a cartographer, who will hopefully sell us a map to a woodland mansion for our 3rd goal. The last one then became a farmer, so that I could somehow get my hands on emeralds, perfect armor, and perfect tools. That was my 2nd goal, and I wanted to finally tackle it now. I bought some protection books because I wanted to make my armor on protection 5, and yeah, I'm stupid and thought that the maximum prot was 5. But that didn't stop me from perfecting my first tool, the pickaxe. Immediately afterwards, I also got my shovel, which I still had to improve with netherite. I did unbreaking 3 on my elytra, and that was it. I could still upgrade my helmet, shoes, sword, axe, shovel, and hoe. And first, I wanted to get everything on netherite. So I went farming netherite for the next few days. 12 ancient debris was enough for me, so I farmed some more quartz while repairing my pickaxe and axe, finding 2 baby piglins on them in the process. I also achieved a new achievement. At home, I baked the ancient debris in the oven and upgraded my axe and shovel. I prepared myself with enough rockets, conjured up the spy racks, and everything else needed to be enchanted for the nether fort, where I spent the next few days level farming and hoping for good enchantments. Of course, this gave me a lot of quartza, but also respiration 3 for my helmet, sweeping edge 3 for my sword, feather falling 4 for my shoes, and a few sharpness books for my sword. As you can see, I had taken some things with me from the nether. Then I put sharpness 5 and sweeping edge 3 on my sword and prepared for another trip into the nether to perfect the rest of my stuff, which required an extremely high level. To make my shoes perfect, I needed soul speed, and you can only get that either in Bastion or if you trade with a piglin. First up was my helmet, which I adored to the max and then just called it a helmet. Next, I put efficiency 5 on my axe and my 2nd pickaxe, and then feather falling 4 on my shoes. But then it was time to look for a bastion, which took what felt like an eternity. I even found exactly the book I needed, but unfortunately it was Soulsbeat 1, and I needed Soulsbeat 3. I also found a 2nd bastion, but apart from gold and netherite scrap, nothing. It was just taking too long to find a bastion, so I started training with a piglin and he betrayed me, and it was extremely close. But I survived with 1.5 hearts. Thank God. After hoping for ages, I finally got the book I wanted and then put it on my shoes, which were now perfect. But I wanted to rename it, which would have cost 32 level. And if you're thinking that I farmed 32 level for renaming shoes, then you're absolutely right. They then became the Baba boots. I just called the trousers and the breastplate a warm sweater. I then found an additional bastion, which I think is the largest bastion you can find. And guess what I found in the very first chest there? That's right, Soul Speed 3. Anyway, I explored the whole fortress and of course took all the gold with me and even found some netherite. It was close again, but just see for yourself. I also renamed the 2 pickaxes, the bow and the shovel, and finally the elytra. Back home, I slapped Manning and Unbreaking 3 on my silk dirt pickaxe and tried to get another sharpness bug. But I was missing the levels, and so I went to the nether to get levels for the umpteenth time. Then I got sharpness 4, combined it with a 2nd one, and now I just had to do it on the axe again, which would have cost that night. I went hunting some monsters because I didn't feel like going to nether again, and something completely stupid happened to me. As if 1 creeper wasn't enough, no, it had to be 2 creepers that blasted away exactly my 2 cards. A few small maps were lost, which I immediately explored again and thus repaired the maps. I still harvested my potatoes in the hope of getting some XP back. Somehow, on 178 day, I didn't feel like farming any more levels, so I prepared for my next building project, a storage box, so that I can finally have order and find my things, because every year I packed all my things outside and I was ready to build. Well, at least almost. I got dark oak wood and activated haste 2 on my beacon. But then it finally started. The first thing I did was cover a large passageway, which was a bit awkward since I was directly under the lake. I then started constructing the first storage compartment until I finally liked it. Then I built it a total of 5 times and placed all the chests, which really took up a lot of wood, and I had to get new ones in the meantime. I still built the ceiling, where I was still missing some lighting, which I then brought and installed shortly afterwards. I got some leather and crafted enough item frames, but before I started arranging the chests, I lit up the warehouse a bit and tried to build the entrance somewhat nicely. I'm not lying, it took me a whole hour to organize the whole warehouse and sort everything. In the end, I changed the floor a bit, which I'm not completely happy with yet, but I will change again. Now, I only had 10 days left until the 200 day, and I still haven't accomplished 2 of my goals. The axe and sword still needed to be improved, and I also really wanted to defeat the woodland mansion, so I tried to hurry up. I still needed mending on my sword and unbreaking 3 and forge 3 on my axe. So the first thing I did was get unbreaking 2 books, and then tried to get the forge book from one of my villagers, and so I picked up a looting 3 book. Yeah, for nothing. After ages of trying, the villager offered me a fortune 1 book, so I got some emeralds, and then the books 4 times. Then it was time to go back to the Nether Evil Arms. The sword finally got the well-deserved mending on it, and it was perfect. I wanted to rename it, but that would have cost 39. And I was really a bit pressed for time if I wanted to do the woodland
Still wanted
thing.
to defeat.
Then I combined the books into Fortune 3, but then saw this. It was too expensive to put on the axe. Apparently I had already repaired it several times, and that's why it didn't work anymore. So I quickly flew back to the upper world and made myself a Diamond XT, which had 2 books on it. In the Nether, again it was completed. Well, at least, almost. I still had to improve it with netherite, and on the way home, I almost died from lava, but then I finally achieved my second goal. A perfect equipment. Now, I only had 5 days left for the woodland mansion, but I hadn't given up hope. I traded some glass with the cartographer, and then he offered me the map, and I was ready for the next adventure. I just had to craft enough rockets because I didn't know how far away the mansion was. With shulker boxes in the pastry and rainy weather, I started the journey, which went across dozens of biomes and several seas. I had kept a keen eye on my map, and at some point I appeared on it. I flew almost 18 blocks, but then I saw them. The home of the pillagers. I landed from the entrance, and the creeper was the first thing I had to fight. I searched the lower floor first and fought the first human residents. In the first box, I stole a music disc that I don't think I had yet. But mainly, I fought zombies, and even found a lapis block in 1 or 2 slanted rooms and in the head of a statue. Then I went to the first floor, where I took a lot of books and was able to defeat the first magician. I defeated him relatively easily, but his pests bothered me. I kept turning them off one by one, but somehow new ones kept coming up. And at first I thought it was a bug. But when they came again and again and again and kept me on low life, I had enough. I went to the roof and wanted to visit the second floor, and then I quickly realized that the magicians were there, and the pests were constantly spawning. It definitely wasn't easy to fight against the opponents. But when all the pillagers were switched off, thank God I got rid of the pests. Next, I mined a lot of wool because maybe I'll need it for something, and then I broke into the secret room. So that's where the pillagers had hidden their treasure. A diamond block. My armor was pretty much destroyed, but I took a lot of loot with me. Most importantly, I had successfully defeated the woodlanders. I made my way home through the Nether and got another achievement. On the night of 200 day, I arrived at my home. That's it. I survived 200 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. The adventure starts exactly where it left off last time, in my base. I got some leather from my cows, sorry for that cows, and made myself 4 frames, but not just any, but very special ones. I had saved my very first tools since day 1 because they would always remind me of my beginning. So I put all 4 of them in my storage. But don't worry, they will get their own display area worthy of them in the future. Next, I wanted to build a creeper farm for enough gunpowder, but for that I had to prepare some building materials. So I learned a shulker box, and on 202 day I fled towards the desert, where I got some cacti for the dye and almost 30 stacks of sand picked up. I then baked a little more than half in the oven for glass, and the rest I intended for concrete, where I still needed a lot of gravel.
About 5
so
seconds,
I went to the Nether. I then came up
farms.
with a lucky 3 on the shovel, so I only got flints out. So I had to make myself a silk Dutch shovel. Not just any shovel, but a really good one. But once I had it, I was off to the Nether gravel farms again. After I had colored a full shulker box, I made my way back. The next few days, I spent preparing for the creeper farm, which would require quite a bit of resources. Of course, I could have made it easier for myself by just building the farm out of cobblestone, but I also wanted it to look nice. And that was worth the extra effort to me. Even the normal oak trapdoors were very aesthetic to me, so I felled what felt like half a spruce forest for them. Because trapdoors, you wouldn't believe, use a lot of wood. With enough wood and stone in the pastry, I returned to my base on the night of the 206th day, where I then prepared the rest of the things. I even got extra soul earth. Maybe that was a bit unnecessary. Now all I had to do was add the concrete to the normal concrete, but then I was finally ready to build the creeper farm. On the 210 day, I flew towards the sea, where I looked for a place and then began building the creeper farm. A relatively simple farm that has been optimized with glass and folding shades. Spiders cannot spawn through the glass, and monsters and skeletons cannot spawn through the folding shades. Every 20 seconds, the spawn creepers are then swept downwards, where they are then burned by the campfire. I then built an AFK bib at black powder, where I tested the farm for half an hour, and I have to say, the result is impressive. From now on, I didn't have to worry about having enough rockets. My next goal was to defeat an ocean monument. Of course, I had to prepare for this not-so-easy task. Enough milk buckets to combat the mining paralysis, some doors so that I don't drown, and an empty shulker box so that I have enough space to take the blocks that can be found there. Now all I needed was a map to an ocean monument, which I got with a fair trade with my villager. Now I was ready for the adventure ahead, which could perhaps be my last. I took stoves and coal with me, and then the journey started on the night of 219 day. I didn't have to fly too far before I appeared on the map, and here it was. The ocean monument, guarded by the guardians. I also immediately got paralysis. From now on, I knew it was getting serious. On a mini island next to it, I got the first milk from my shulker box, and countless drowned people were already attacking me. I swam under the monument and just built myself into it. Now I had penetrated, and shortly afterwards I had to fight the first enemy. I ducked around the corner, and the first big guard was waiting for me. I knew these critters were doing a lot of damage, so I had to be extremely careful. I then finished him off with skillful close combat and ranged combat. Now there were only 2 big ones left. I dove back and forth a lot and explored many parts of the dungeon and had to be careful not to drown. Luckily for me, the ocean monument had a room full of sponges, which I immediately dismantled and dried straight away in the ovens I brought with me. Afterwards, I found the room where the second Elder Guardian was. I also had an exciting battle with him, but of course he had no chance against my movement, my sword, and my armor. From now on, I only had one boss in front of me. That's why I planned to enter the ocean monument from the very top. And when I was at the top, I drank the milk, dismantled the block, and then I saw it. I pushed in and went into melee combat, and after a few attacks, I had it made. I successfully defeated an ocean monument. But it wasn't over yet. I wanted to take some of the blocks with me because, let's be honest, these blocks look really cool. And I already had 1 or 2 building projects in mind that I could build with these blocks. I am particularly pleased about the sea ladder. Next to the shroom lights, they are the hottest light block. I then also found a treasure that was hidden. 8 gold blocks. When I had mined enough blocks, I dived away a bit and found some underwater ruins, where I picked up a good fishing rod, a treasure map, and some very interesting blocks. Since I was already on an adventure trip, I was still looking for the treasure from the treasure map, which I found after a long search, but unfortunately, there was no good loot in it. Well, no matter. The adventure was now over for me, and I set off on the return flight. At home, I packed all the things I had taken with me into the box and thought about what I should do next. I realized that I didn't have room for my ocean monument blocks, and I didn't want to just continue to expand my storage system. I had to build a separate area for these blocks. But where was the question? My next construction project was coming up. I wanted to build a hallway where I could add all sorts of long staircase and down that I had built in the first 100 days was a bit unnecessary, I must say, but it was the perfect spot for the next building project. Unfortunately, the haste effect wasn't enough to get there, so I built a temporary full beacon directly above it. I wanted to build the hallways out of basalt, so I got some decks of it from the nether and then began building the hallway. I tried a lot, but in the end I was happy with the look. As mentioned before, I wanted to build a separate room for the ocean monument blocks, so I did that and decided on a kind of hemisphere. Or after that, I built the same thing down again, so actually, a whole sphere. You can only see it very easily, but I created a kind of fog with the glass, which I think looks very nice. I then placed 2 tequila shulker boxes and filled them with stuff related to it. It was finished for the time being, but I plan to beautify this room a bit. My biggest problem has always been levels, so I wanted to tackle that next. I wanted to build an Enderman farm with End, and it was going to be devastating. I sorted out my camp a bit and then started preparing for the farm. For this, I needed a lot of materials again, but I didn't want to farm for it forever. So this time, I decided to also build with cobblestone, but that I also had to farm. But then I ran into a problem. I didn't have a name day, and I really needed that. After a bit of research, I realized that if I trade enough with a librarian, his last trade is always a name tag. So I got a lot of unbreaking books, exchanged some books, and the bag. And then I became an expert and offered myself a name tag, which I immediately bought from him and renamed. Now I had all the materials together, and I flew towards the end portal. I then built a nether portal there, but then it went to the end. The first thing I had to do was get all the way to the bottom, where I realized that I had forgotten a lava bucket. So I flew to the end portal again, but this time I took the lava bucket with me. With lava and water, I made it all the way to the bottom, where I built myself far away with leaves, and then the construction of the Enderman farm began. In the end, I needed an Endermaid that had a low probability of spawning when you became an Ender Pearl. Of course, the 16 Ender Pearls I brought with me weren't enough, and I had to get some. To do this, I put my netherite breastplate back on, so as not to take too much damage, and then I wanted to fly back to the farm. But I hadn't put on my elytra. I was very slow to respond, and it took me a while to press escape. Only a few blocks decided between life and death. I analyzed in the recording where I had my elytra in inventory, and then it was a question of speed. I only had one attempt. My entire Minecraft hardcore world was at stake. But just see for yourself how it turns out. Yes, I did it. Yes, I actually did it. And as you can hear, I was completely relieved. This showed me again how difficult a hardcore game can actually be, and what small mistakes can cause all progress to be lost. Let's go. Oh my god, let's fucking go. I continued with the farm and then finally got the Endermaid, and that was about it. From now on, I didn't have to worry about levels anymore. I then tested the farm, and it only took me about 8 minutes to get from level 20 to level 50. So it's an extremely cool farm that also gives me endless Ender Pearls. Back home, I wanted to beautify and decorate the ocean room a bit. To do this, I flew to the sea and fished for a while until I got a pufferfish, because it just looks so nice, and I think it shouldn't be missing in a room like this. I tried a lot to see what looked good and what didn't, but in the end, there was some kind of tree in the middle. Or actually, I have no idea what that was supposed to be, but I think it looks like art and relatively nice art. Otherwise, a few sponges and cool items here and there that go with it, including the pufferfish. On the 237th day, I decided to farm netherite, but not with a pickaxe, but with TNT, so that it would be a little more effective and quicker. But I didn't have enough sand and black powder at home, so I stood on grab at my creeper farm until the 239 tag, and then I got enough sand, and then made almost 4 stacks. Then I made some fire resistance potions, and I was ready for the nether. With TNT, it was definitely a lot easier and quicker to find ancient debris, and I came back with 22 ancient debris on the night of the 240 day, where a horde of zombies awaited me. Now you're probably wondering why I even needed netherite. My third goal for the 300 days was a full diamond ick. And for that, you have to farm diamonds for a few hours. Pickaxe durability takes up, which is a lot. Also, I only wanted to go with Silk Dutch, as it allows you to ultimately take a lot more resources with you. One pickaxe wasn't enough for this, so I made 5. Thank God I still had enough diamonds, and I didn't make just any pickaxes, but rather 5 perfect ones. To do this, I had to trade some books with the villager, and then I started slapping the books on pickaxes. Of course, the arm bosses suffered, and I ran out of iron, which is why I even had to take a block for my full beacon. Now, it was just more about the level, so I used my Enderman farm for it. Here they were, my 5 Silk Touch spikes. I just had to improve it with netherite, which I then did in my base. I was now ready for what I hope will be the longest mining tour I will ever do. With shulky boxes in my pastry, I started the search for 1,476 diamonds on 244 day. Yes, you heard that right, 1,476 diamonds, or 164 diamond blocks. I roughly explored miles of tunnels, caves, and took everything I could find, from coal to redstone. Somehow, it was a bit fun at the beginning, because I knew that I would collect a lot of resources that I could use to build really cool things. Since I really took everything I could find, my shulker boxes filled up relatively quickly, and I had to go to the 256. Return to my base that day to deposit the loot collected so far. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are an excessive number of resources, and the site is also very satisfying. But my actual goal was the diamonds, and I didn't have nearly enough of them yet. But giving up wasn't an option for me, and I went to 11 with more shulker boxes in the pastry and just looked for diamonds. There's not much to say about it, except that I sometimes thought about the meaning of life. It became really tiring as time went on, but I had the goal in mind, and I was determined to see it through. Over time, I realized that it was unnecessary to take all the money with me, and that it just took up more time. So later, I just focused on diamonds and nothing else. On the 273 day, the time had come. All 5 Silk Dutch pick hooks with Umber King. I did the math, and I mined about 640 blocks, of which unfortunately only 473 were diamond blocks. But I was happy to finally have an excuse to stop doing mine, and I made my way upstairs, where a sweet wolf saw my exhaustion firsthand. At home, I baked everything into the box, and treated you to how many resources I collected. Holy, that's really a lot, and I was a bit proud, I have to say. Then it was time to mine the diamonds and see how much I had actually driven with luck 3. I built myself way up into the air and then I took down all the blocks at once, which I have to say was so satisfying. In the end, a few stacks of diamonds came out, which was a total of 105 blocks. Lots of them, but unfortunately not enough for the full diamond beacon. For that, I still needed 59 diamond blocks. That's when I realized I wasn't going to be able to do it in the 300 days, but then in the 400 days to 100. But diamonds weren't the only thing I still had to mine with Lucky 3. So I took most of the used iron, gold, redstone, lapis, and copper out of the boxes and placed them outside. Really hard when you think about it that it took so long just to place it, but I now knew what I was using it for. Had really been farming for the last few days, and that looked really cool. Then we started dismantling all the fun. In the end, it all came to an end. Yes, I think I won't have to farm iron, gold, redstone, lapis, copper, and coal anymore in the near future. On 281 day, I decided to complete my middle card, so I made a few maps and started flying and exploring new biomes. Here it was, the full middle map. I was having so much fun exploring, so I decided to tackle the third and largest map on the 282 day. The scale is so small that you really have to explore a lot to explore an entire map, let alone 9 of them. I even found an ocean monument, a jungle biome, and a small picture land. So the trip was really worth it, and I got an even better overview of my Minecraft world, and I hope you do too. Day 283, I headed into the end. Why are you wondering? Well, I wanted shulker boxes in every color there was, and I was missing some. So I looked for an end city, and after a short time even found one with an end ship. There I mined my second dragon head and got a second elytra. There were also some really cool things in the boxes. And I also took some blocks with me and a lot of these end rods. I defeated a lot of shulker players and of course took the rest of the mayor's staff with me. When I was finished with the end city, I flew down from a huge height. But I don't have Felder Falling 4 on my shoes for nothing, and I survived with 3 hearts. But one NCT wasn't enough for me, so I went straight to the next one, where there was another final ship. Of course, I looted everything there again, and with 44 shulker shells I took with me, I think I had a double box, and I have to say that there are some cool things in there. Then I made some shulker boxes and started dyeing them every color possible. Most of them just look good, I have to say, and I managed all but one, namely the brown one. For this, I needed brown dye, which you can only get from cocoa beans. Thank God I already knew where there was a jungle, so I took my beacon with me and flew off. When I got there, I immediately set up my full beacon and activated Haste 2 and destroyed half the jungle. I not only took enough wood and bamboo with me, but also enough cocoa beans, which is what I had actually come for. I was about to fly home when I saw another jungle. Of course, I didn't fall into the trap there, and from the secret room, I took a saddle and 3 stick pistons with me. On the way home, I got a treasure map from a sunken ship that had 2 diamonds. Then I colored the last shulker box and then lined them all up outside in a row. And you can't tell me this looks bad. I only had 7 days left, and so I decided to build an automatic sugarcane farm. And so over the next few days, I built 3 of these systems, all of which lead to a box. What do you think about the design? I think it's quite okay. I then flew to the end again to repair my 5 pickaxes and reach level 100. On 313 day, I had something very special planned. Unfortunately, it was already night, and so it was a bit of a challenge with the whole monster. But I built it. This one. That's it. I survived 300 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. Day 301. The adventure started where it left off last time, and I was extremely motivated to do cool things again. I started by harvesting my fields, the sugarcane, the pumpkins, and the melons. I then started expanding my melon field in order to get rich in emeralds as quickly as possible. I still needed enough villagers to trade, so I brought in some villagers and put them in boats. Then I attracted the zombie and zombified some of my villagers again. I brewed some weakening potions and then healed all the villagers. They were all supposed to become farmers and live in the second compartment, so I built some composters and beds for them there. Then I started trading the first emeralds and downgrading them until they all gave me an emerald for a pumpkin or a melon block. In between, I picked up more pumpkins and melons, and the foundation for one of my goals was laid. On 305 day, I tackled my next big goal, the advancements. Of course, I couldn't do all of them in those 100 days, so I looked to see which ones were fairly easy and which ones I could complete straight away. I drove around with a goat and made a glowing sign that says, "Subscribe to Jonathan Nice," and if you haven't already and appreciate the effort behind videos like this, please subscribe to this channel. It would be a great help. Next, I caught a fish and even 1 or 2 axolotls. The next task was to eat every food there is once, so I prepared every single meal for the next few days. I collected everything from a puffer fish to a tropical fish to an OP golden apple. Unfortunately, when I went hunting for rabbits and was also exploring another map, the recording was broken. Unfortunately, you don't see how I ate the last food, namely the OP golden apple, and thus managed to advance. A big sorry from my side, but unfortunately I can't change that anymore. But here's a quick summary of what I had to eat for it. Anyway, from here I had recordings again, and you can still see how the eaten cake was on the floor, and I still got my effects from OB Gold Apple. Back at home, I started the next challenge and tested my bow aim. After 32 shots, I managed to hit the bullseye, and the next advancement was completed. I traded a bit with my villagers again and tamed my first cat right on my property. What should I call her? Feel free to write me a few suggestions in the comments. For the next advancement I took on, I had to spot a parrot through my telescope. I really looked for a parrot in the whole jungle, and after forever searching, I finally saw one. Of course, I tamed him straight away, and he enjoyed sitting on my shoulder. I then continued flying again, but didn't consider that my new companion wouldn't be able to keep up at this speed and that he would stay behind. But that didn't stop me from doing the next task, which was firstly to shoot with a crossbow, and secondly to hit a pillager with his own weapon. That same night, I managed to kill a skeleton from at least 50 meters away and get a record. On the 316 day, I took on the Nether Advance, and I had to use up the last of my netherite for it. I then placed the respawn anchor, which does relatively little for me in a hardcore world, and the guide stone for my compass. Then I spotted another guest and stepped on a strider. Next was the end, and I made 2 more achievements there. On the one hand, I got the final egg, and on the other hand, I was shot 50 meters into the air by Schalke. The dragon egg had a special place at home. I wasted the next few days trying to find powder snow, only to realize that you can't find it at 117. Well, I wouldn't say it was completely wasted either. I found another pillager outpost and completed another map. Next, I made my first iron golem and checked for the first time how much the sugar reheat has gotten me so far, and I'm very happy with it. Then the pumpkin and melon farm were harvested, and then a few emeralds were picked up again. I then got my first honey and searched a bit for a bee nest with 3 bees in it, but unfortunately, the 2 that I was able to take with me got a place behind my first card. Now I've had enough of all the advancement for now, and I decided to expand my base a bit. To do this, I tore down half a hill and brought everything onto 1 level. I even had a visit from a pillager, but somehow he was just there alone. I then continued to dismantle enough so that I had enough space for my next construction project, and I think I had removed enough earth and stone. The next day, I did what I had wanted to do for a while. The perfect infinity Ogen. I enchanted some bows, and then combined them in the anvil. Then I had her. The perfect ranged weapon. Unfortunately, I didn't have a suitable name at the time, so tying it had to wait. I then flew back to the end to repair my tools. At home, I tested the bow a bit, and I have to say, yes, it is very OP. For the last 100 days, I hadn't managed to farm enough diamonds for the full diamond beacon, so it had become the task of these 100 days. I prepared myself sufficiently with my pickaxes and shulker boxes for the next mining tour, where I spent the next few days mining block by block and hoping for diamonds. It took 11 days or 3-5 hours until I was able to mine 263 diamond ore blocks. Of course, I had calculated it, and if I had any luck, the full diamond beacon would work out. I was relieved that I probably made it, but unfortunately, I couldn't be sure about 100 yet. That was decided by the Dark 383. I took all the farm diamond ores, used them to build a fat cube, and now all I had to do was decide luck 3. And as I said in the last episode, it's just satisfying to mine so many diamonds. In total, there were 61 diamond blocks. And guess what? I only needed 59 for the full diamond beacon. So I had finally completed my first mega project. Well, at least almost. I still had to build, but you can't just put something like this somewhere. No, you have to build a fortress for that. So I installed it. I was still missing a lot of concrete, so I got some more sand, turned the powder into real concrete, and continued building the castle. Now it was time to finally build the full diamond beacon. I proudly placed one diamond block after another. Then the time came. The beacon shot out of the beacon, and I had finally made it. For the next few days, I was still working on the details of the castle so that it would look really beautiful and magnificent. I beautified the outside wall, the floor around it, I recolored the beacon, and I even flew into the jungle to get tendrils so that I could install the moss stone tiles. Meanwhile, a creeper went up next to my dogs, and I was lucky that they were only injured and nothing worse. I made the castle a little more decorated, and I also decorated the entrance. The towers each also got a campfire for the smoke, and the interior area got some blue fire. Now I was finally satisfied, and I can present you the final product. I still had to sort all the remaining materials from building, so I did that, and in the meantime, I melted all my copper. The next day, I wanted to tackle something I've wanted to do for ages, which was to get a trident. This is actually not as easy as you might imagine. A drowned man only spawns with a probability of 625 with a trident, and then only drops it with looting 3 to 11-5. So approximately every 139 drowned person only drops one trident. But that didn't stop me from attacking the first ocean ruins, and that's what I found. Treat yourself to that. Just 2 ocean monuments right next to each other. After a short time, I realized that it would be much more effective to combine the search for ocean ruins and the exploration of another map. I got another Heart of the Sea, saw a baby turtle push its mother into the sea, flew through several biomes, and found a completely exterminated village, which unfortunately I couldn't do anything about. Most importantly, I kept my eyes open for underwater ruins and hoped for drowned people with tridents. When I was just swimming in the sea that night, I had to experience this. The turtles were attacked by a group of skeletons. I had to do something quickly, so I intervened and eliminated the attackers, thereby protecting the turtles. Thank God they had survived. The search for a trident continued, and when I saw this drowned man with an enchanted trident and turned it off, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. I really got it dropped. Now, not only did I have another weapon in my possession, I only had 2 more advancements to tackle. However, the map wasn't fully explored yet, and I was hoping to get another trident or 2. And yes, unfortunately that only remained a hope. After I found a few more villages and finally finished with the map, I made my way home, during which I simply lost about 2,000 blocks. And yes, instead of just looking at the wrong map, I could have. I can also just pay attention to the coordinates, but you're always wiser in hindsight. Day 361. I was back home and did the advancement straight away with my trident. For the next one, I had to turn a villager into a witch with lightning, and for that I needed a specific enchantment, namely channeling. For this, I got XP from my Enderman farm, and then had some luck with enchanting. I then tested the trident a bit, and well, it's a cool weapon, but it can't keep up with my other ones. I then went straight to the next achievement, and set up some cauldrons in the snow landscape to get powder snow. During the short period of time that it snowed a little, some snow even accumulated in a basin. In the future, however, it will have to snow more often to fill an entire kettle. Regardless, I definitely got some snow and wanted to build my small room out of calcite, set it up and cut out its eyes, and then it came to life. I got another name tag and thought for a long time about what I should call it. I ended up naming it after whatever day it was, namely Day 362. The next challenge for me was to become a master hunter. To do this, I had to kill every single monster once, and I was only missing 2 more. Namely an endermite, which was relatively easy to kill, and a zoglin. Zoglins don't just spawn like that. You have to bring hoglins into the overworld and wait about 10 seconds until they transform into a zoglin. So I launched into the nether, built a portal, lured a hoglin in, and then watched it transform. Then it was time for me to complete the next big advancement. For my third goal in these 100 days, namely the double chest of emeralds, I still had to farm properly. So I harvested all my fields again, and in the meantime I thought that it might be smart to mine the melon with a Silk Ouch XT, firstly to get more out of it, and secondly to save on crafting. So I made myself a diamond axle, enchanted it, got the books I needed, and renamed it. I then not only traded with my pawns, but also maxed the villagers in the first compartment, who have really cool trades, like cleansestone or just an iron for an emerald. Which gave me an idea. I've wanted to build an iron farm for a long time, and if you look at it in the long term, an iron farm is the best thing you can do. Not only for trades, but for various other farms, you need a lot of hoppers or other items for which you need a lot of iron. So the next day, I prepared myself for building the farm, for which I also had to go to the end to get obsidian. Then I had all the materials together, looked for a suitable place for the farm, and construction of the iron farm began. The basic framework was now in place, and I know it looks a bit confusing. Basically, the middle part is the place where the iron golems can spawn. Villagers come in on the outside corners, and 2 more zombies are trapped between them. The game thinks it's a village, and it has to protect the villagers from the zombies, and so iron golems spawn in the middle. During the night, I attracted 1 zombie at a time. I built over the portals with slabs and locked so that no monsters could spawn on them, and now I had to bring a total of 12 villagers into the farm. To do this, I built a long railway and spent the next few days trapping the villagers there. And let me just tell you, it was a complete slog. Really, that wasn't fun, but thank God it should be worth it. I was now finished with the construct in the overworld, so I started on the second part of the farm. To do this, I went into the Nether and built the iron collection point there. I was done now. At least I thought so. Somehow the farm wasn't working and I was almost desperate. After some experimentation and a lot of trial and error, I finally got it to work, thank God, and I was so incredibly relieved. I then tested the farm for half an hour and treat you to the result. Yes, that's awesome. 941 iron and 229 roses. So this farm makes me about 210 iron blocks per hour. That's exactly why I'm not making you a standard arm, but an extremely good one so that I can get a lot of iron in a very short time. At home, I sorted out my storage a bit and realized that I still had a double box of iron anyway. Well, at least I had built the farm for the future. I spent the next few days trading constantly with my villagers, frequently harvesting my fields and bringing some order back to my camp. Meanwhile, I melted all my iron and set up the double chest that I still had to fill with emeralds for my goal. On the 382 day, while I was waiting for the villager trades, I had nothing left to do, so I decided to build another farm, namely a sheep farm, actually a wool pour. While I was preparing the things, I found a little cat in my camp, which I tamed straight away, and it looks really cute. Then I started building the farm, which is relatively easy to build and has a simple mechanism. Then I just had to lock the sheep there and dye them the color I ultimately wanted the wool to be. And the farm was finished. The sheep eats the grass beneath it, the observer knows this, and the dispenser then shears the sheep, and so it goes on and on. I wanted to build the farm a little nicer and, well, I honestly don't think what I built is that cool. I'll do it better again. Trading with the villagers all day was a bit of a waste of time, so I decided to tackle my next construction project. Another theme room. This time not a marine area, but a mining or cave room. I prepared myself with all the utensils, set up the beacon again, and started building the next room. Of course, while I was building, I was constantly trading with the villagers to get the double chests of emeralds. And I really put a lot of time into the details, and I think the end product is pretty awesome. Now I already had a second room, and I wonder how many of these rooms I will have after 10 or maybe even 20 days. Who knows? Be sure to write your tip in the comments, and when the time comes, whoever guessed it correctly will get 50 from me. But don't forget, you can only give 1 tip. Anyway, I continued to trade emeralds diligently, and then I achieved my third goal. I have a double chest full of emeralds, and I'm now sure the richest in this Minecraft world. I had now achieved 3 of 4 goals. There was only one thing left to do: to fight the Ender Urge and the Wither at the same time. Of course, it won't be an easy task, but I really wanted to do it. I needed 3 more Wither heads to even spawn the Wither. So I spent the next 3 days running around fortresses, hoping for a head from Wither skeletons. When I finally had the 3 heads, it was just a matter of preparation. I crafted 4 end crystals so that I could respawn the Ender Dragon, made a few potions, lots of rockets, and equipped my bow. Then I said goodbye to my cows, my sheep, my horse, my villagers, my dogs, and looked at my full diamond beacon again. It could be the last time I see her. Day 3, 195. The day I will tackle my final goal. I flew to the portal, jumped in, and then I was ready. I placed all the 4 end crystals. Then the towers were reactivated, and the Ender Dragon spawned. Immediately afterwards, also the Wither. I had drunk the potion of slow fall, which turned out to be a big mistake. I couldn't fly properly. Regardless, at the beginning I was concentrating on destroying the end crystals, and during that time, the Wither had completely different enemies, very aggressive towards the Enderman and sometimes completely forgot about me. But thank God that played into my hands and I destroyed all the end crystals. But then I tried to fight the Wither, which put me on low life a lot, so I changed my strategy again and I was sure that I would only be able to do it if I unlocked the Ender Dragon first. After a few shots, I fired my final shot and the Ender Dragon was defeated. The obviously stronger opponent was still alive with almost full life, and I tried really hard to defeat him somehow. But he always managed to get me to 1 or 2 hearts, and a totem was even used once. It became clear to me that I wasn't going to make it like this, and unfortunately I had to flee. I hadn't given up yet, so I prepared very well at home this time. I made strength potions, regeneration potions, healing potions, and a few golden apples. On the 397th day, I tried it again, and with my potions and golden apples, it was definitely a lot easier. When I went into close combat, he was down quicker than I thought, and here was my reward. The Nether Star, and also the second portal to the End City. I was very happy that I achieved my final goal. At home, I made a beacon, and all I had to do was build a suitable place for it. So I prepared all the building materials, used my collected emeralds to finally build the beacon, and then I started building the casing for the beacon. Now all I had to do was place the beacon and activate it, and the beacon fountain was ready. On 400th day, I flew back to my Enderman farm to repair all my things. But before the 400th day ended, I only had one more thing to do. That's it. I survived 400 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. Friends of the Sun, here I am again. It was the 401 day, and the first thing I did was check out the buildings from the last 100 days. I had finally decided on the 118, so next I looked for a small lush cave to get my first moss block. When I found one, I was just amazed at how cool it looked. There are really nice new decoration blocks, and getting clay is now a lot easier than before. I definitely took some of the blocks there with me, and I wanted to use the moss block to build the next farm, namely a bone meal farm. It was raining outside again, so I went to the snow mountain and waited there for the cauldrons to be filled with snow. Of course, no one was completely full, so I now prepared all the things for the farm, and the building could begin. Then it just had to be started again, and yes, it didn't work. After swapping a redstone with a repeater at random, I got it working, thank God. And the farm is not only extremely useful, it also looks very interesting. Then I tested them for half an hour, and I got 4 stacks on the bone meal. So she produces 8 stacks per hour, which I think is impressive. Now the farm was finished, but I couldn't just leave it there because it would look ugly. I had to build a panel and one that would also fit the farm. To do this, I got all the blocks I needed and started building. Meanwhile, a group of pillagers just came by, which I killed, and then the raid started. With my new bow, I preferred to stick to ranged combat, which worked very well. There were 7 waves in total, making it the hardest raid you can get. But the bow was so good that I hardly had to worry about my villagers. I then killed the last witch, and the raid was won. The reward was 4 more totems and the Hero of the Village effect, which made me even more popular with my fellow villagers who were already staying here voluntarily. The banners were then placed on my fortress, which was now called the Pillagerburg. But then the building continued. Of course, I thought about it, and it had to fit the Bone Mill farm, so I built a kind of magical ruin with a small chapel. Meanwhile, the pink concrete was just a placeholder, which I then replaced with magical purple glass. But it would have looked strange if I had left the light green glass in the farm, so I replaced all of that too. I made the interior of the chapel a little better, and also built up the walls inside the ruins. In the back area, a mound of stones fell into the building, so to speak, so the ceiling there was built a little more realistically. Since it is a bone meal farm and I had built a small chapel on it, I thought it would be the perfect place for a crypt. A crypt, also called a lower church, is a room under the church that was used for holy graves. And you can't tell me that this isn't just awesome, that this is right under the Cabell and the bone meal farm. I was still missing something, and that was a glowing lichen. I searched for something in caves and finally found one. This can be spread with bone meal, and it serves as a light source, which I still needed in the crypt. Then all the graves were built and I was finished. Now I can finally present you the final product. Pretty cool, right? When you go into the Kabel, there is confession straight away. Then you come down to the crypt, where there is a passage for activating the bone meal trap. Along the corridor are the graves of Hofner Louis, Ritter Saal, Baron Piet, Prince Somrat, Landgrave Radgat, Elector Elephant, Archduke Davidus, and of course Emperor Jonathan. Then you come to the boxes that are filled with bone meal. Because someone wrote it in the comments on the last episode, I removed the pumpkin from my snowman, and he got a face. Now that I had built so much, I wanted to do the next advancements. I made a jukebox and played my records. As you may notice, I completely celebrated the music, but strangely, I didn't get the advancement. Then when I checked again, I noticed that I had to play the music in a new 118 biome. I saw this right next to my base. Treat yourself to this. How the hell did so many bees end up here? In any case, I then dismantled a beehive, and luckily there were 3 bees in it, and I got the next advancement. But now I wanted to tackle the jukebox thing, so I made a new map and looked for a mountain meadow. I dug up another treasure, found an ice biome, and looted a pyramid. After a short while, I noticed that the world generation was still like the 117, so I just fled straight away in one direction, but there was no sign of the 118 anywhere. I then tried to get very far away by nether raveling, and then I finally saw the new 118 world generation. After a bit of flying, I finally found the meadow beam. There I played the record and finally got the advancement. Since I was traveling anyway, I went straight to the next achievement, namely adventuring time. To do this, I had to visit all 50 biomes. The only thing I was missing was the stalactite cave, the frozen peaks, the sunflower plain, the snowy slopes, where I also found powder snow, and of course took 3 buckets of it with me, and also made a nether portal in case I needed more of it at some point. Now I was only missing one biome, namely the bamboo jungle. I really looked for it for ages, and you can't imagine how happy I was when I walked through that nether portal and saw this. I flew there, and then I achieved the next huge advancement. Of course, I took some bamboo with me and even bred 2 pandas. At home, I did the advancement with the powder snow, and then I started the next crazy thing. Star Trader. I had to trade with a villager at maximum build height. To do this, I built myself to the top and made a minecart route. On the 437th day, the time had come. The villager had enjoyed his last nap with solid ground under his feet, and then he went up, more precisely to 319. There, of course, he became a cartographer, and I became a star raider. I wanted to keep him up here, but I had to build something for him. So I gathered the materials for the next building project, for which I needed a lot of red wool, and when I had everything, I started the future one, to build accommodation for the explorer. I placed the last block and the hot air balloon was finished. Then I took the pilot to his place, where he will stay for the remaining days. What do you think of the hot air balloon? I find him quite beautiful, especially with shaders. It just looks cool when you look at it from below. Day 444. I got the last honey bottle and 3 honeycombs, which I could use to complete the next 2 advancements. The next challenge I had was surviving in a free fall from the maximum building height to the maximum depth. But before I did that, I had to take a breather, and so I flew to my Enderman farm to repair all my things, and something completely stupid happened to me. I threw away all of the ender pearls in my inventory and slipped fashionably on my shoes. Yes, that was completely stupid and completely unnecessary. RIP Baba Boots. At home, I tried the Case and Cliffs advancement, and the first attempt, well, then maybe the second, nothing either. But all good things come in 3s, so yeah, incredible. I had actually done it. New shoes were now in order, and of course I wanted to make the best ones there were, just like before. For this I needed Soul Speed 3, and so I built a mini piglin trading farm and then let it run for about 30 minutes. And treat yourself to all the loot I got, including, thank God, the Soul Speed books. Then it was time to combine all the books, which took a lot of levels, and in the end, all I was missing was feather falling. To do this, I took all the things with me to my Enderman farm and enchanted them as much as I could until I finally got them and finally made my shoes perfect again. Of course, I then called them the Baba Boots too. They obviously still needed the netherite upgrade, but that had to wait a while. Instead, I tackled the next giant advancement: breed each animal once. To do this, I prepared whatever food I would need and the task began. Dogs, pigs, chickens, goats, horses, rabbits, bees, turtles, and foxes, to name the simple ones. Oh yes, in the meantime, I always tamed all the cats in the villages, because there is also an advancement where you have to tame every type of cat. I also just found an igloo, which I think was a new addition to 118, where there is a secret ladder into an underground laboratory. Apparently the experiment was never completed. Then I bred the heavy animals like a mule, a donkey, mushroom cows, an ocelot, and llamas, which I even brought into my home. In the nether, I needed 2 more to complete. Once the hoglins and then the striders. And with that, I had managed all but 1 species of animal. I had saved the axolotls until the end, and you can't imagine what a relief it was to finally have completed this advancement. Oh yes, and I have almost completed my map. On the 465 day, I marked the spawn chunks. And do you remember this spot? At each corner, I built a beautiful pink concrete tower to encircle the spawn chunks. In the future, I will build a few farms within these chunks, because the spawn chunks are constantly loaded, and I don't always have to stand AFK at a farm. It runs, so to speak, 24/7. And unfortunately, I built the bone meal arm just outside of it. I then placed torches everywhere in my base, which I could perhaps have done a little earlier, but I would say later than never. Now it was time for me to build the next farm again. This time it was supposed to be a cactus farm, so I got some sand from the desert and a few more cacti. I didn't want the cactus farm to be visible eventually, so I found a spot inside the spawn chunks and started digging a fat hole all the way to level 0. It took about an hour, but I was able to spawn the cactus farm. Well, not yet. I also wanted to build the farm beautifully, and for that I wanted to use sea lanterns, which I didn't have nearly enough of. Instead of just killing a few guardians for it, I wanted to build a farm for it. Why not, right? The few guardians would have been too easy. So I prepared all the things for which I had to go to the end and Netta. Then I flew to the ocean monument and wanted to start the bound, but that was impossible. So I flew back again, made invisibility potions, but then the bound could begin. Then when I was done, I tested the farm for half an hour, and yes, it didn't work, and I had wasted half an hour. But I quickly figured out what the mistake was. I built the AFK lattice 10 blocks too high. I corrected the error and then stood AFK for a quarter of an hour, and holy shit, the farm produced a lot of items and only within 15 minutes. Now, I was able to craft enough sea lanterns and I could tackle the cactus arm. To do this, I always had to mine a lot of deep slate into cobble deep slate and then turn it into Polish deep slate. I then pulled up the walls with the Polish deep slate and it continued like that. Meanwhile, a thunderstorm started in my Minecraft elt for the first time, so I had to take advantage of it immediately and tried to get mobcops, which you get when a charged creeper blows up a zombie, a skeleton, or another creeper. I even had to use a totem at one point, but I ended up with 3 zombie heads, a skeleton head, and a creeper head. In hindsight, I could have taken part in the transforming villager into a witch advance, but well, maybe another time. We continued with the cactus arm. Once the first 2 walls were up, I began placing the cacti and building the collection area. I know, 3 darshan is pretty poor, but I was out of cacti. The farm will continue to be expanded anyway. Then I built the other 2 walls, and when I was finished, all I had to do was close the hole and build a suitable entrance for it. After thinking about it a bit, I decided on a small desert house. So as always, I prepared the building materials for it and started building it. Then I added the cactus farm and built a mini desert biome around it. That was, I have to say, relatively difficult to build because it's really not that easy to make a neat transition between such a mini desert biome and the forest. With the 2 palm trees and the custom color, it looks relatively nice. Only the side with the rock isn't that great yet, so I'll have to terraform it a bit in the future. Then I sorted all my storage again, and there was still one thing missing from the cactus farm, which was the elevator. To do this, I got some kelp, and a short time later, the elevator was operational. On the side with the magma block, you are pulled down, and on the side with the soul sand, you are pulled up. Now I was finally finished, and I have to say, I think it's pretty cool that such a small house leads to such a big underground cactus farm. I sorted through my entire inventory again, and I noticed that I only had 8 days left. But I wanted to use this as much as possible and do cool things. So I started by naming my animals. From now on, the dogs were called Huey, Dewey, and Truck. 2 of my cats, Coco and Ty, and the last one was Gimby. You are always welcome to write suggestions for names for other animals in the comments, and if I like one, I will name it accordingly. For example, for the llamas or the baby zombie on the chicken. Next, I did the next advancement, which was to have each potion effect induce at the same time. To do this, I briefly became a master brewer and brewed almost every potion. For the beacons, I activated Bounce, Regeneration, and Resistance, and then that was it. I drank every potion and had every effect at the same time. Looks pretty wild when you look in the inventory. But I had no time to waste and I moved on to the next crazy thing. To do this, I flew to a pillager outpost and the journey began for me and a pillager. I wanted to lure him to my house, and one thing in particular caught my eye. Pillagers have really good aim, not like me. Through the forest, over small lakes and mountains, I lured my new buddy to my home, where I then got into a boat with him and stayed on K for a very long time. The pillager shoots his crossbow constantly, and when you sit in the boat with him, he shoots every single arrow. So I waited until his gun broke. Then I built him his new place in the Pillagerberg, where he can never escape again. He was then chauffeured up by minecart and just looked at me stupidly. The next crazy thing I tackled was composing appropriate entrance music for the Pillagerberg. To do this, I had to craft some note blocks and repeaters, and it would have been pretty crazy if I had had to press a button or walk over a pressure plate. So I did this with tripwire, which is almost impossible to detect. I then built the music piece under the castle, which really wasn't difficult with a tutorial. You just had to set the repeater "it" correctly and set the correct tone for the note blocks. And that was basically to let you hear the final product. I then stood at my gunpowder farm for a quarter of an hour because I had run out of it and was able to craft rockets again. I also got a lot of TNT again, and then decided to use netherite for the shoe farms. When I had enough of that, I tried to get heads again, and when I had 3 of them, it was time to return to the overworld. There, I melted all the ancient debris, crafted it into netherite, and used it to improve my shoes. Then I built 3 more floors on my cactus arm, and when it was day 500, I built myself way down again, and it was time for the next Ritter fight. I spawned in, drank my strength potion, and yes, the fight wasn't all that exciting, but I did get another nether star. As always, I only had to do one more thing, and when I did that, I traded something with my explorer and ended the day with him on the hot air balloon. That was it. I survived 500 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. So here we are, day 501. It's been a long time since I checked how much the sugarcane farm brought me in, and I think it's impressive. A wandering trader then visited me, and yes, he only offered me trash, so I turned him into trash. I didn't have any time to waste, so I went straight to work on the first project. I wanted to expand the hallway to accommodate additional rooms, but there was a problem. If I were to expand it further as it is now, there could be planned construction projects or farms later on, so I decided to build further down. So I crafted another beacon and set it up, where I didn't check for a moment that there shouldn't be any blocks above the beacon, but then the hollowing out could begin. With Haste 2, it's pretty quick, so I was able to move on to the floor and then the walls and ceiling. In the end, I just installed the lighting, and from now on I could build more theme rooms. On the 503 day, it started to thunder, and I immediately made myself a lightning rod and flew to the nearest village where I could complete an advancement. I turned a villager into a witch. During the thunderstorm, I got another zombie victim, and then I set up lightning rods everywhere in the hope of getting the next advancement. And after a while, a lightning rod finally diverted lightning. Then I used the time to get more heads, and another totem had to be used. I came back with a zombie victim and a skeleton victim, and of course the 2 advancements. I then dismantled a lot of spruce wood because I would need it for the next big building project. A farmhouse that also has an automatic villager arm under it. I would also need a lot of hay balm, so I still harvested my wheat field. Then I cleared the entire area where the farm would stand and construction could begin. When I was finished with the rough construction, and yes, no worries about the roof, I just didn't have enough hay bales. I terraformed a lot more and planted a wheat field and a carrot field. Then some work was done on the interior design. I enchanted my hoe and then put efficiency 5 and mending on it. But since it no longer had any durability, I flew to my Enderman farm and repaired everything there. Now it was time to get the missing bales of hay. You can find enough of them in villages, so I made a map, stood at the creeper farm for about 20 minutes, but then I flew off, hoping to find a few villages and thereby complete the last map. Meanwhile, it started to thunder again, and of course I tried to get monster heads again. And yes, this time I couldn't do it without using a totem either. During my trip, I also just found this. How the hell did this get here? Unfortunately, I only found one village where I could take bales of hay with me. Back at home, I installed these straight away, but I needed a few more to cover the entire roof with hay bales. I have finally completed the map, but I had no time to waste, so I flew to every village I could remember and took every single bale of hay with me. I also found this awesome mine shaft where I almost died from fall damage. Once I had collected 4 stacks, I headed home and finally finished building the roof. I then spent some time with the details, and it may not seem that important, but believe me, the little details make such a big difference. With a little skill, you can even get to the first floor. Now I was finished with the farm building, but I wanted to build an automatic villager farm underneath. That means I dismantled the full pecan, set it up at the farm, built myself down a bit, and then the free building could begin. Like in the last 100 days, it's not the most exciting thing, mining thousands of stone blocks, but that's how I wanted it. Then I built the basic framework, for which I needed some spruce wood. I had planned to do 8 fields so that some of the farm would pop out and make all the effort worth it. You should then be able to walk through the middle and see all the villagers working. Then I started, or wanted to start, breeding villagers. And I, idiot, thought that it could be done with wheat. And yes, I wondered for the next few days why I wasn't having any villager babies. Then I prepared the remaining things for the farm and built the express train for the villagers, to whom I unwittingly gave stack after stack of wheat. Then it was time to cut down the trees again and finish building the cabins for the villagers. And the very first guests were allowed to enter their new home. For each farm illager, the farm needs another villager to be locked up behind it. The farm illager then wants to have a child with the other villager and therefore throws him the items he has collected, such as wheat. And that is why the 2 minecart operators then intercept the items, which should ultimately come to me. Oh yes, and of course beds have to be nearby for the farm to function. I finally figured out that the villagers need bread, carrots, or potatoes for breeding. At least I got new villagers from now on. Now it was time to build an item lift so that the collected items could reach the box I wanted. To do this, I built the simplest one available, on both sides, and connected them to the boxes straight away. I kept doing the same thing for the next few days, breeding villagers, getting villagers, imprisoning villagers, planting the fields, and yes, that's how it went for a while. Completely randomly, one of my cats, Croco, drowned. I think one of the escaped villagers pushed the cat into the water, where only a few threads of him were left. Slowly the farm was filling up and the end was in sight. I then finished building the room, which I think looks quite pleasant. Nothing exciting, but comfortable. The 4 spaces on the left are all for wheat, and on the right are 2 for potatoes and 2 for carrots. Then I built the elevator and cleaned up some more. Now I was finally finished and I could test the farm. So I stood AFK for half an hour, and I think the result speaks for itself. Although I'm not sure why I only got so little wheat. Now I can present you the final building. I then dismantled the beacon and removed all the rails and brought the 2 escaped villagers back to their home. It was time to do more advancements, and I decided to complete the nether. For this, I would need a lot of obsidian for portals, which is why I went to the end and mined a lot of obsidian, which is really annoying and just takes a long time. I then drank a lot of milk, and it was time to complete the first advancement. To do this, I went to my strider, built a portal, and in the overworld, I built a 50-block long lava route, where a wandering trader also visited me and his llama simply walked into the lava. On the night of the 538th day, I traveled the 50 blocks in the overworld with my strider, and got the achievement, but that was the easier of the two. For the other one, I had to bring a ghast into the overworld and kill him there. I tried a normal portal first, but no chance. No ghast spawned nearby at all, and transporting a ghast over a long distance with a fishing rod was almost impossible. After a long time, I had enough and wanted to build a ghast trap. I looked for a suitable place and started building them. I still needed some obsidian for this, so I got some from the end and built the big portal. And where you come out, I also built the portal much larger, because if it was too small, the guest in the portal would die. Then the lava wall was made, which was supposed to slow down the guests and make it easier for me to fish them into the portal. The trap was now up, and the first guest was already caught, but unfortunately I couldn't get him in. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it on the next attempts either, so I modified the trap a bit. And when I activated the portal again, I just couldn't believe it. A guest had ended up in the overworld. However, that could have happened, and I finally managed the advanced reboot. Was really relieved. When I got home, I did another one, so I grabbed my axolotl and wanted to use it to fight another mob. Unfortunately, the first died while fighting a drowned man, but I helped the second axolotl and got the advancement. Now I had had enough action and I wanted to tackle another construction project. I keep half the forest with me and not without reason. I'm planning on building a medieval town. The first building, namely the farm, is already there. The next thing I would build now is a clock tower that would stand in the middle of the city. For this I needed some dark oak wood, which I quickly farmed, and spruce wood as well. Then all the remaining things like decorative blocks, etc., prepared and I was ready to go. Enjoy the time lapse. I then needed something concrete when I ran out of gravel, so I got some in the nether, where I almost burned. Then I finished building the clock tower. For the roof, I chose dark prismarine, which I'm definitely happy with. And then I took care of a few details and the interior. On the 554 day, I felt like building another farm. After thinking for a bit about which one would be best, I decided on a wither skeleton farm. Not just for the wither heads, but also for the tons of coal and bones, which my bone meal farm might make a bit unnecessary, but whatever. So I prepared everything for which I had to go collecting obsidian again. Maybe an obsidian arm wouldn't be bad in the future, right? Then I farmed nether bricks, and when I had everything together, all I had to do was find a suitable fortress in Soulsend Valley Beam, and that of course took some time. I then found one where I thought it would be the perfect place for the farm, but things would turn out differently. Building the farm was actually quite simple and didn't take too long. Of course, that was just the part at the fortress. I still had to build a few things, for which I also went over the bedrock ceiling for the first time. There I built the rest of the part, and now all that was missing was the part in the overworld where I had forgotten an important thing. So I prepared myself to look for a Minecraft for the next few days, but the Minecraft ATT was completely fine with me, and I really didn't have to look for long. But you can't imagine what happened to me there. Here in the scene you can see how I took the scissors out of my shulker box, and then dismantled them, and then threw away the copper from my inventory. I thought I had picked them up. Instead, a deep slate ended up in my inventory. The bad thing is, I didn't notice it for a while, and unfortunately it spawned. Look at what was in there. Yes, it hurts. It really hurts. I took more than enough spider webs with the scissors and finished building the farm. It should actually work now, and yes, what can I say, it didn't work. I then destroyed the bedrock so that I don't always have to tear blocks in the 14.0 overworld, and tried around a bit with the farm, where I managed to get it to work somewhat, but I wasn't really convinced yet. Spoiler, I should have been happy with that. What I did to myself in the next few days, yes. I decided to make the entire fortress spawn-proof so that the wither skeletons couldn't spawn anywhere other than on my platform. When I was about halfway done, the farm worked a little better, but I wanted to make it really effective right away. So I flew back again and took a lot of stone with me, which I then used to check the entire fortress's spawn. And yes, the farm was functioning even worse than before, or actually no longer functioning at all. But I think I knew what the problem was, namely the Crimson Forest next door. A lot of mobs spawn there. So that's right, I also placed half slaps everywhere. Once I was done with most of it, I tested the farm again, and it finally worked really well. I looked at the recordings and finally checked where I lost the shulker box. I was aware that she had most likely been despawned long ago, but I still tried my luck and got down exactly where I had dropped her. And yes, it was actually clear that she wasn't there anymore. No matter, I will be able to farm the lost things again. As long as I don't die, everything is fine. To get to the farm faster, I wanted to blow up a second bedrock oak directly above my portal. I got some more sand so I could craft TNT, and then I went over the bedrock corner. There I set up the structure and opened the hole. From now on, I could get to the farm much, much faster. I placed harp slaps everywhere where there weren't any, and finally I was done with it. The farm was now working really well, and I tested it for 10 minutes. The result was several stacks of coal and bones and 11 bullheads. The drama was finally over, and I didn't have to worry about the farm anymore. Since I now had some wither heads, I had to use them, so I went to the bedrock ceiling and spawned 3 withers at the same time. I knew what I was getting myself into, but I somehow thought it would be easier. I did enormous damage with the strength truck Indus, and the first wither was defeated a short time later. With low life, I brought down the second wither, and the third one was child's play. 2 withers were still out, so I defeated them one by one, and now I was richer with 5 nice stars. I had learned from the mistake with the shulker box and made myself an ender chest, which will now serve as my backpack. I realized I was out of totems, so I wanted to get the bad omen effect from a villager outpost, but unfortunately, neither had a villager with a flag, and I wasted a whole night. The next construction project was just around the corner, and I prepared a few things for it. I terraformed something, or simply built a flat area where the house would stand. Then I started building the oven house. I was done with most of it, but I was still missing a few bricks for the roof, so I dug down to my lush cave and mined tons of clay there. I then fry this in my ovens and craft the bricks. I then finished building the roof and then the exterior facade. I have to say, before this hardcore project, I really did very little building in Minecraft, so it was a real struggle for me to build this reasonably well. In the end, I was quite satisfied, and I think that's definitely possible. At the perfect time, a troop of pillagers came by and gave me the bad omen effect. With that, I started the raid with the villagers under the farm and defeated the first waves with ease. But then I ran out of food and had to steal some from the carrot farm. The problem was, carrots aren't the best food, and from then on, I had to fight with 1-3 hearts all the time. It was really a complete cramp, and once I even dropped half a heart. But I defeated the last opponent with a bow shot, and the raid was finally over. As a reward, I received 8 banners and 4 new totems. Of course, the interior design for the oven house was still missing, and I came up with something very special for it. I wanted to build a super smelter. I prepared everything for this, which, among other things, required an extremely large number of hoppers. Then, I started building the super smelter. I think the design is relatively self-explanatory and not too complicated. When I was finished with it, I had to test it, and to do that, I went to my cactus farm, where glowing squids suddenly lived, and picked up some cacti. And holy, I've really gotten a few in the last 80 days. I then packed enough coal and enough cacti into the boxes, and the super oven was used for the first time. I then took care of the interior of the house. I wanted to keep most of it in brick, because it somehow fits in with the oven house. I made the floor from a pallet of stones. Of course, I ran out of bricks again, so it was time for me to go back to the lush cave and get tons of stacks of clay there. The super oven was used again, and I finished building the interior, where I really experimented a lot. I then built a fireplace and was finally finished. Now you could see it in its finished form. On the 583 day, I took care of a new pickaxe and axe. I enchanted both of them, got some books from my villagers, and then put them on the tools. Of course, I ran out of levels in the process, so I flew to my Enderman farm and perfected it. I then called the pickaxe Ich bin reich 2.0 and the axe melons make me rich 2.0. I lost the first versions of it in the shulker box. At home, I upgraded them to netherite and renamed the shulker boxes. I then made another shulker box that was supposed to be filled with golden carrots or food in general. I wanted to build another room now, and I decided on the topic that gave me the most headache these 100 days. The Nether. First, I built out the room, where in retrospect I probably should have put a beacon, but whatever. Then we went into the Nether to get the various resources. I wanted to have all the biomes in the room. I started with the Basalt Delta, continued with the 2 forest biomes, and finally the Soul Sand Valley. At first, I thought I could just leave the ceiling with netherrack, but that really wouldn't have looked good. So I decided to build the ceiling nicely, although of course I ran out of resources. So I got the missing blocks and finished building the room. I'm actually quite happy with the result. You are so beautiful. You are so beautiful. On the 588th day, I made myself a new hoe, enchanted it, put a few more books on it, and turned it into a netherite hoe. Since I didn't have much time left, I wanted to make more use of it. I wanted to start the next mega project, draining an ocean monument. To do this, I flew to one of the 2 ocean ruins next to each other and first defeated all 3 Elder Guardians there. Then I had a little cramp while building the platform in the middle and almost died at one point. Next up was sand farming, which I did for the next 15 minutes. I then built the circle shape around it, which is really satisfying to look at. Now the wall had to be pulled and I kept placing sand until I eventually ran out. That means I went back to sand farming where something really stupid happened to me. I destroyed my shovel. Well, there's nothing you can do, but thank God I had a second one. When I was finished, I moved on to putting up the walls. But it's not enough if you just place the sand wall on the outside. You also need smaller sections inside so that you can dry out the area with the sponges. In between, I flew home again and made myself a new shovel, which I then used to farm sand and then used the sand to build more walls. This continued until the 600th day dawned. But I wanted to take the last day to fulfill your name requests. The baby Ambi on the chicken is now called Hawk Rider, the Boxama, Yonatanio, the other Lily, and the third Chili. Thanks for the suggestions. If you have more, feel free to write them in the comments, and if not, feel free to write a comment for the algorithm anyway. As always, I only had one thing left to do, and when I did that, I watched the sunset from the clock tower. That's it. I survived 600 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. Friends of the Sun, it was the 601 day, and the first thing I did was check how much Villager Farm has brought me in so far, and holy, that's a lot. I definitely don't think I'll starve anymore, but I didn't have any time to waste, so I went straight to work on the first project. I grabbed all my flowers and some seedlings and started hoping for bee nests. They spawn with a probability of 5 if you place a flower next to a sapling, and then let the tree grow with bone meal. As you might have guessed by now, I wanted to build a honey farm, but for that I needed some beehives with 3 bees in them. So I planted what felt like 1,000 trees, then built glass balls like that, and then made sure that each beehive actually had 3 bees in it. And friends, let me put it this way, it really was a complete slog at times. I was all the more relieved when I got to 606. Day 8 finally had full beehives. Coincidentally, a new cat ended up in the boat, right next to Hawk Rider. The honey farm shouldn't just sit around ugly somewhere. I wanted to build a cool medieval building for it, like with the super oven or the villager farm. But I was missing a few resources, so I briefly farmed wood, then turned brown concrete powder into normal concrete and cut down a large part of the forest again. Now all that was left to do was a little terraforming, and the building could begin. I didn't have nearly enough glass with me, so I had to go to the desert where I got a few stacks of sand and then melted it into glass in the super furnace. But I had no more money, so I took 10 stacks of coal ore blocks and used them to build a tower, which I immediately dismantled again. Ultimately, well over 20 stacks came out, and the super furnace was able to start melting. Then I finished building the greenhouse. I really put a lot of effort into it and tried to incorporate some nice details. When I was done, another group of pillagers came by, and I killed them and got the bad omen effect. With that, I started the raid with the villagers under the farmhouse. This time, the raid was a little easier. Instead of carrots, I had golden carrots, and that really makes a big difference. Things only got tricky once with 2 hearts, but otherwise, the raid was really no longer a challenge, and on the night of the 616th day, I killed the last enemy. Now I was richer with 8 banner and 5 totem. The greenhouse was finished. All that was missing was the honey farm, and when I wanted to build it, I realized that I had built it a little too small. Well, now I just had to improvise and decided on a strange spot. The farm is now not in front of you, but above you. But I think it has something, and is even better than if I had built it on the ground. Unfortunately, I can't explain the farm to you very well, because I don't really understand it myself. But as soon as there is honey in a beehive, it is collected by the dispenser, and then ultimately goes into the box at the bottom. At least it should. It just didn't work for me. After a bit of research, I realized that I needed to put a lot more glass bottles in the dispensers, so I quickly repaired my shovel at Enderman Farm, and then farmed some more sand. While I waited for it to turn to glass, I beautified the outside of the greenhouse, and then the inside, which is where I really put some thought into again. With a little skill, you can get up to the farm, and I also hid the boxes and funnels. I then filled the farm with enough glass bottles that should work from now on. Time to present you the final product. Next, I wanted to tackle a bigger project, a gold farm. I would also need over 3 shulker boxes of magma blocks for this. So I only farmed magma blocks for the next 2 days until I ended up with exactly 6,689. I also needed a lot of glass, which I wanted to dye black glass so that the farm would look cool in the end. On the one hand, I was missing a lot of glass, so I went sand farming again. And secondly, I was missing the black dye, so I went to my guardian farm for it and stood there AFK for 10 minutes. With the ink sacks I got from this, I definitely had enough black paint, and I could start preparing the rest of the materials for the farm. Since it's not going to be a small gold farm, there are an incredible number of things that I had to take for it. Once I was done preparing, all I had to do was find a suitable spot for the farm and then mark it on the bedrock ceiling. On 626th day, the construction of the farm could begin. First, I built the area where the piglins fall in and die using entity cramming. Then the shafts where they fall down were built, and the platforms for the next 2.5 hours, where I had to use Frostwalker shoes against the magma lock relatively early on, made, and some invisibility potions against the ghasts that were constantly spawning. Yes, that was quite tiring, I have to say. Finally, a piglin with a name tag was placed on every corner, and I was finally finished with the farm. Well, almost at least. I also built a small pillow camp. But then I shot a piglin and tested the farm for 20 minutes. The result was 46 gold blocks and a happy Jonathan. Now I wanted to continue with my ocean monument, but sand farming with a shovel would have been too laborious for me. So I crafted 3 more diamond shovels, then got all kinds of books from my villagers and then put them on the shovels. I now had 3 more perfect shovels. So I flew to the desert and got 4 full shulker boxes of sand. Then we continued with the construction of new sand walls. After 50 minutes of just clicking the right mouse button, the sand was gone again, and I didn't get much further. So this is really a mega project. I wanted to continue a bit. So here's another time lapse of how I farm sand. Yes, very exciting. For the next half hour, I just placed sand again, and it's really frustrating to see how slow progress is here. The further into the middle you get, the more annoying the guardians become. So I flew home again and made some invisibility potions, and guess what I did next? That's right, sand farms. Well, I consciously decided against a sand uppeter. With invisibility potions, I then pulled up more walls, and now, thank God, I was getting closer and closer to the goal. I was now more than halfway done. Next, I wanted to complete another advancement, namely look at the Ender Dragon through binoculars. To do this, I had to respawn the Ender Dragon. So I crafted 4 end crystals and the binoculars that I would need for advancement. Then I flew into the end and placed all the 4 crystals, and right before the dragon respawned, I accidentally hit one of the crystals, and thank God I had a totem in my hand. If I didn't have one, I would have lost the world and the series would have been over. Well, that didn't stop me from trying again, so I crafted 4 end crystals again, and this time I managed to respawn the Ender Dragon. I destroyed all the towers and then fought the Ender Dragon until I fired the final shot after some time. As a reward, I got another access to the End City. It was only after the fight that I realized that I hadn't actually done the advancement that I actually wanted to do. So it was time for me to craft the End Crystals a 3rd time. but I still lacked gas inside, so I quickly flew into the nether and got 2. I crafted the crystals and placed them in the end a 3rd time. I then fought the Ender Dragon again and defeated him. And this time too, I had almost completely forgotten about advancement. But luckily, I remembered it at the last moment and looked at the Ender Dragon through the binoculars. I felt like building something again, so I first planted a few trees and got some wood. Afterwards, I gathered all the materials I would need, including for the first time, wool from my wool arm. I then terraformed a bit where I just ran out of soil and had to mine some somewhere else, but then I continued with it. With this concrete, I then made a rough plan of the market square that I wanted to build. I would generally recommend always doing this. I started in the middle of the market square, where I built a fountain, but then the construction of the market stalls could begin. I wanted to add traders to the market stalls so that it would look lively. I didn't want to put any in villager, so I thought about what I could do. I then decided on armor stands to represent the merchants. Of course, I would also make them clothes, so I made leather caps in every color and put them on the armor stands. Then they were given a full suit of armor, and I also decorated the item frames with the respective sales page. But now I was finished and can present you the final marketplace. Amara.org community subtitles. I was out of rockets, so I stood AFK by my gunpowder arm for 15 minutes. And when I went to pick up the black powder, I killed a drowned man who simply dropped me a trident. But I'll take care of that later. Now I wanted to build another farm. You wrote me so many comments that I should build a raid arm. So I wanted to accommodate your request here. By the way, you can also write your ideas in the comments. It would really help me a lot. I prepared all the things for the farm, for which I had to farm sand again. But then I flew to the perfect spot in the sea, where there is a village and a pillager outpost nearby, and started building the farm. That didn't take too long, but what did take a long time was getting a villager here. Once I had this, I flew to pillager outpost and waited until the captain spawned with banner. I then killed him and flew back to the farm and activated the raid, but it didn't work as I thought. When I checked, I realized I had forgotten to place the lava, so I took a chance and flew up, where I then placed the lava. But the farm was now working, and I tested it for 45 minutes. I think the result speaks for itself. About 3 stacks of emerald blocks and some gunpowder. Oh, and I didn't even take the totems with me. There would have been far too many. But the farm is a complete success. Thank you for your comments. I wanted to continue with my village, so I started with some terraforming. Then I removed tons of dark oak wood and a little bit of spruce wood. But now I was ready, and I started with the basic structure. For this build, I simply used a Google build as a template and built it in a very similar way. Of course, I wanted to incorporate my own ideas and not just dismantle it. The house would then be my future warehouse, where all my items would be stored. I ran out of spruce wood in the meantime, so I planted a mega spruce tree and cut it down, which ended up with 16 stacks. But now I could continue building the house. I wanted to make the roof in a gray color, but for that I would need gray wool and gray concrete, neither of which I had. So I dyed some of my sheep gray. For the wool, I now had the sheep. I still needed concrete, for which I had to go to sand farms again and then get them into the nether gravel. Then I was able to craft the gray concrete and start building the roof, which I had real difficulty with. Somehow I got it together and immediately started filling the roof a bit more with texture. I used gray wool as well as gray concrete and concrete powder, and that alone makes it look 100 times better. So I did the same thing with the white walls and then little things here and there. The next thing to go was the gray wool. So I took gray dye again and dyed more sharp gray, which I then sheared throughout. I was then able to finish building the roof. I then built the fireplace a little nicer, which I struggled with a bit, but in the end, I got it quite acceptable. Now I was almost finished building the house. What was still missing were the details and the decorations, which should not be underestimated. So I added a little something here and there and made everything a little nicer. There were flowers and leaves placed everywhere, and I even had to collect some for them. But then I was finally satisfied and just had to build the landscape around it. So I went mining there and terraformed around the landscape. Time to let you see the final product. The house not only had to look good from the outside, it also had to serve as a storage room for me. So I spent the next few days dealing with it. I started with the main area, where wood, stone, and ores, which I often need, can be found right away. It took quite a long time to move all the stuff here from the old warehouse, in case you're wondering why it took me 5 days. Next came the mob drop section, and then everything that had to do with farming. Then the small area for tools and books. I then ran out of leather for the item frames, so I flew around slaughtering cows and horses. The warehouse then continued to be built, and thousands of items were transported here. I'll just show you briefly how it's structured now. You come in, and in front of you are the main items that you need most often. Then on the left, you come to the mob drops, the farm tems, tools, and books. To the right of the main items are things that I often need, such as torches, sticks, shulker boxes, and work blocks. Next is the redstone area, and finally are the decoration blocks. I won't be able to do the rest until the next 100 days. One thing I've wanted to do for ages was get the Nether sound record. So I went to Bastion Uchi and hoped for a little luck. I found the record right in the first bastion, and I was really happy. But since I also found other cool loot like netherite, obsidian, or gold, I decided to loot more bastions. It did get risky at times, but I have to say that I was completely lucky. I found one bastion after the other, and the loot was absolutely awesome. On the day of 698, I came home and treat you to everything I took with me. A lot of netherite and even an OP old apple. But what I actually went into the nether for was the record. So I took the jukebox and popped in the disc and celebrated the song in its entirety. I only had 2 days left, but I wanted to use them. I took cacti from the cactus farm and expanded it a bit. Now it's almost finished. On the 699 day, I took care of the trident that I wanted to make perfect. I put a spell on it and got really cool things on it, exactly what I wanted. I bought mending and unbreaking from the villager and then put everything on the trident, which was now perfect. I flew to the end and repaired all my tools so that I can get started again in the next 100 days. I wanted to use the last day again for your name requests. So I bought name eggs from the villager, and the horse is now called Roidiger, the cat next to the hog-eater Gino, the lonely dog Carlton, and the greatest man of honor, namely the mending Illiger Kaiser Jonathan. That was it. I survived 700 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. So here we are again, and the first thing I did was increase the counter to 700 since I forgot to do that last episode. But I just couldn't get it to look nice, so now the 7 is really ugly. Oh well. I then flew into the jungle and got some vines because I would need them for the next construction project. Then I started doing some terraforming where I wanted to put my nether portal. That was my first building project in this episode, and after I had prepared the things for it, the building started right away. As you can see, I also tried to build this building in the medieval style, which I succeeded to some extent anyway. I added details using stones and made the tower look a little older. I got some earth, some blocks of obsidian and birch leaves, which I used to finish building the area around the tower piece by piece. I then played around a bit with glass circuitry behind the portal, but that was just unnecessary, so I just left it alone. Then I added some leaves and terraformed something around it. But now I was finished and can present you the portal room. I also wanted to synchronize the portal right away, so I did it with a portal on the nether ceiling, where if I go through now, I'll come out at the portal tower and of course the other way around. Next up was expanding the warehouse. The first thing I did was build a first floor, from which you can look down, and immediately after that, a second floor. It was important to me to make it look like you're standing in a huge room and not just cover every floor with a ceiling. I then took all of my nether Thames and made my own little nether realm for them. I then built a first floor above the decorative area, and then a third at the top. I placed the end Thames directly above the nether realm in the tower, which aren't too many anyway. I ran out of leather for the item frames, so I flew around a bit and took 1 or 2 cows with me. The next area I built was the concrete or glass area. First came concrete in every color, and then the glass in every color, and I'm glad that turned out so well. I spent the next day transporting items from the old warehouse to the new one. Then it was time for the next advancement. Kill 2 phantoms with 1 shot. To do this, I needed the Piercing 4 enchantment, and thank God it worked on the first try. While I was waiting for Phantom, I took advantage of the time and dismantled the glass domes for the bees from the last episode. But then daylight came, and I decided to build a small cow farm for leather. When night came again, I just completely screwed up and just couldn't manage to do the advancement. So I brought cows to the cow farm. If I multiply them myself and open the trapdoors on the sides, then the little children will slip through left and right, and I would just have to wait until they grow up, and then I could either kill them automatically with lava or kill them myself with a looting tool. Not a very good farm, but better than nothing. I was harvesting my fields again for a long time, and when night fell, I set up my little system, lured 2 phantoms into the boat, gave them each 2 Dirac and a Faust hit, then positioned myself correctly, shot both phantoms at the same time, and got the advancement. Now another huge construction project was just around the corner, something I had wanted to do for a long time, an end portal room. So I mentally prepared myself for the somewhat larger project with a beacon and some item space. When I arrived at the end portal room, I set up the full beacon and the hollowing out of a huge room could begin. When both of my pickaxes no longer had any durability, I went to repair them briefly, but then continued to mine thousands of stone blocks. I had now finished clearing out the room. All that was missing was the end room itself. But I didn't have the end blocks, so I flew to the end, where I took a lot of end stone with me and then looked for an end itty look. When I found one, the first thing I did was loot the ship, where I took another elytra and then I mined the purple blocks there. I spent a whole 45 minutes there, and of course, I not only dismantled the blocks, but also colored some shulker shells, and of course took all the loot with me. This is what the end city looked like, and that was the whole result. I prepared with some concrete paint, sea lanterns, and various leaves, then flew to the end portal, where I moved the beacon somewhere else, but then the building could begin. Unfortunately, I ran out of specifics very quickly, so I had to go to the nether gravel on the 731 day, and then farm sand. I then crafted blue and purple concrete, and when I wanted to craft the black one, I realized that I didn't have any black dye left. So for me, it was time to stand at the Guardian farm for 10 minutes, AFK. With the ink bag I got, I made the black paint and the black concrete. For the next 10 minutes, I made the concrete out of the concrete powder, and the last thing I needed was terracotta, because I wanted to build an awesome pattern with the glazed terracotta. To do this, I looked for a mesa in my screenshots, divided the coordinates by 8, and built a portal there in the nether. I came out with almost perfect terracotta and dismantled some of it. At home, I melted the terracotta and was ready to continue building. On 740 day, I ran out of black concrete again, so I had to farm sand and gravel again, where I had to briefly pay respects to a grass. Then I got some obsidian, and with over 15 stacks of concrete, I started building the ceiling. But I completely misjudged myself, and the concrete thing was gone faster than I could see. So I was allowed to farm sand and gravel again on the 744 day and stand AFK at the Guardian farm on the 745 day. This time, I made more than enough black concrete with which I could finish building the ceiling and then the floor under the water. Then I finished building the walls, added a little something here and there, added more texture to the floor, and built the nether portal, or that all around. I was still missing obsidian, so I quickly got it and took a number of shulker boxes with me. Then the entrance was built, and now it was time to clean everything up. That's why I took the shulker boxes with me and filled them all with items. I was really lucky because my 21 shulker boxes just kept going. I still had to do one thing. I placed chorus plants on the islands and waited a few minutes for them to grow. Now I was finally finished and can show you the finished final portal room. Back at home, I sorted all the Schalke boxes back into storage, which took a really long time, and there is no room for all of the items. I think I'll have to build a basement with a storage area. I then took some of my iron, mined it with the lucky pickaxe, and put it all in the oven. I crafted a lot of hoppers with the iron because I needed them now. I was planning to connect my gold farm with a piglin trading farm so that I could get enough gravel and not always have to farm the gravel separately. Once I had all my things together, I made my way to the Nether to my gold farm, where I built a small automatic sorting machine. But I modified it a bit with an automatic burning machine for gold swords. Then I built the hopper all the way down and looked to see which bedrock block I could destroy. And I was really lucky because there was only one bedrock directly under the hopper. So I changed the key assignment from the right mouse button to the O and spammed completely in and just managed it on the first try. The hoppers were then extended further down and I started building the piglin trading station. When it was finished, I logged in 2 piglins, renamed them, and destroyed 2 more bedrock blocks, although this time I needed a little more trying. Now I was finished and could test the double farm a little. I then went to check, and the auto sorter definitely worked well, and the gold tracks at least got down to the piglin trading farm, but apparently that one didn't work. Oh well, I didn't feel like fixing the farm now. But what I wanted to do was get every record there was. I already had a few, but there are 14 in total, and my goal is to own every single one. I crafted some pistons and built small traps for creepers and skeletons. Then came the night that I spent luring creepers into traps and letting skeletons kill them. That worked really well, I have to say, and I got a few new records. Of course, I needed a nice place to store the records, so I decided to build another film room. So I set up my beacon and started hollowing out the room. I then collected all the blocks, and the building could begin. Then I crafted enough tube boxes and finished building the room. All I had to do was add the records, and I was done. Now you can look at the music room in peace. On the 767 day, I first dismantled the cow farm I had started. It was really worth it. Well, I wanted to build a much better one in the Nether. I prepared all the materials, looked for a crimson forest on the Nether ceiling, and construction of the small farm could begin. It's really quite simple. The hoglins simply spawn on the platform and are afraid of the blue mushrooms. So they run into the lava because they think they can walk over it, and the hoppers then simply collect the drops from them. When I finished building the farm, I stood AFK for about 20 minutes, and I think that the loot is really impressive, given that the farm is so easy to build. Now thank God, I don't have to buy any more golden carrots from the villagers. The next thing I wanted to do was start the street of my city. So I grabbed stone bricks, andesite, and polished andesite, and just started placing them randomly. I think it looks much better now. On 770 day, I decided to build a sand tuber. I know I said in the last episode that I didn't want to build one, but since you've written endless comments that I should build one and that sand farms, otherwise it would have just been a waste of time. But I finally decided to do it. So I prepared all the items for it, and I was only missing one important thing: slime blocks. Unfortunately, I didn't have nearly enough, so I fled to the swamp and farmed a little all night, but somehow hardly any spawned. So I decided to cut down all the trees during the day so that the slimes had more space to spawn. But it felt like not a single slime spawned during the night. And after a bit of research, I figured out that since the latest update, this has to do with the phases of the moon. And I just had an absolutely bad moon. I had to wait a few more days for a good one. So I flew back and thought about what I could do in the meantime. I then decided to hollow out another theme room, and then another, and then another. Now, if I want to build a theme room again, at least I don't have to hollow it out anymore. Oh yes, and feel free to write me a few ideas for such rooms in the comments. I still had plenty of time until the next full moon, and I wanted to continue building my city. This time it was supposed to be a fountain, so I looked for a place and started building it. Then at the end, I had a little problem with the water, but I was done with it and pretty happy. I just don't know if I really chose the right place for it. On the night of the 776th day, there was a full moon, and I immediately flew into the swamp, where there were a lot of slimes waiting for me. I farmed all night long and ended up with almost 4 stacks, which was definitely enough. I crafted the slime curls, and I was ready for the sand upper. I took a few ender eyes with me, and the search for the second stronghold began. After a short time, I found it and made my way downstairs, where I entered the fortress and eagerly searched for the portal room. When I finally found it, I activated the portal, placed my respawn point there, and started making some more space in the room. Then I destroyed the portal frames with the help of a mushroom, and sometimes I really don't understand the game. Well, whatever. I then built the dupe machine on both sides, and then the chunk loader. When I wanted to go through the portal, I accidentally dropped my shulker box, which then simply fell into the lava in the nether, and I know it was completely lost. I mean, there wasn't that much loot in there anyway, but the slime balls still bother me. In the nether, I built the same redstone construction for the junk loader, where I had to go home briefly to get my car topper, and then I tested the junk loader. And well, what can I say? It didn't work. Over time, I realized that I just had to build the construction on the other side in the nether. So I did that, and then the charm cloader worked too. Now it was time to start the machine briefly and finally build the collection point. Then I finally finished, and it worked perfectly. So I stood AFK for 20 minutes, and the result was 2 full double boxes. I then took the sand with me, with a few shulker boxes, and I was motivated again to continue at the ocean monument. Before that, I brewed some invisibility potions, but now I was ready. I flew to the monument and did nothing but build sand walls for 2 days until I eventually ran out of sand. Now I wanted to start drying them out, so I flew home again, where I took the obsidian and torch with me and then dried out my swarms in the nether at the monument. I then started drying out the first section, but that didn't work so well, so I divided the sections, again into smaller parts, which then worked much better. Over time, it became annoying having to go into the nether so often to dry out the swarms, so I decided to loot the ocean monument right next to it. I defeated the first Elder Guardian there, but then got mining clay despite being invisible, so I flew home again, took the milk pails and doors with me, then flew back and defeated the 2 more Elder Guardians. I then looked forever for the room with swarms, but then dismantled them all, and from now on, I no longer had to make do with 28 swarms, but rather 58, which was definitely worth it. Now I was able to dry out the individual areas much more quickly, which is really a mild cramp. I'm really looking forward to the day when I'm done undraining the monument. Well, I spent the next hour making smaller sections, removing the water with the sponges, and then drying the sponges again in the nether. It was a bit boring, but I love the grind, and I'm really looking forward to the end result. When I was finished, there was one thing I was looking forward to, which was destroying the sand walls with torches. That was really satisfying, I have to say. This also gave me a lot of sand back, so thank God I don't have to farm sand for it anymore. Unfortunately, I didn't make much progress. Now, I wanted to continue with my city and build another house. This should be right next to the kiln house and built in relatively the same style. So I drew the floor plan, got some more dark oak wood, and started building the house. When I was almost finished, I flew into the taiga and took a few fairies with me because it looks really good when you hang them on a chain in a flower pot. I then decorated some more around the house and can now show it to you with shaders. What do you say I should use the house for? Feel free to write it to me in the comments. I used the night to get a few more records, and I even got 3 new ones, which I put straight into my music room. Now I was only missing 4 more, and one of them can only be found in mob pawnerists or strongholds. So I tried my luck and flew to a stronghold where my sand ochre is and looked for the record in the crates. But unfortunately I didn't find it. Well, whatever, I'll have to look for them for the next 100 days. I then stood on cave for a bit with my wither skeleton arm and got some sencoal and 5 new wither pots. Now, I only had 3 days left, but I wanted to use them as best as possible. I decided to spruce up the area next to the fountain a bit because it looked really weird, and I wanted to build something here. The first thing I did was build a covered path to use the space between the well and my warehouse for something nice, and I think it works quite well. Then I built a small fire pit, some decorations, and a place to sit next to the fountain, and improved the path a bit. Finally, I built a small bell, just so that the space there could be used a bit. And just the few things that I have built there now make so much difference and bring so much more atmosphere to what is still a mini town. I spent the 799-day building new cactus layers, and I have finally finished building the cactus arm. I don't think I'll ever have to worry about cacti or green dye again. The 800-day was here, and I went into the nether and defeated 2 withers at the same time, where I was at half a heart for a short time. But I was now 2 nether tars richer. As always, I wanted to use the last day for your name requests, and so the black cat is now called Doxeppel, the Prot 3 villager Franz, the Enderman Gina, the villager next to Lauch Eli, a farm illager Kirby, and the mighty iron golem Friedrich. Now, I only had one thing left to do, and when I did that, the 800-day was already over. That was it. I survived 800 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. Friends of the Sun, here we are again. The 801 day started, and the first thing I did was take care of my new bow since my old one had almost no shelf life left. So I enchanted some bows and then combined them in the anvil so that I had the perfect bow again. The only thing missing would be mending, but unfortunately, you can't combine that with infinity. Well, no matter. I took a few milk hammers with me and flew to another ocean monument where there were even 2 rooms with sponges. That was of course very nice, and I now had a total of 2 stacks of sponges. I then flew with these to the ocean monument and continued drying out. It was always the same procedure. Make smaller areas, then dry them out with the sponges, and then dry the sponges in the nether. I did that until the night of the 805 day, and at least got a little further. Nevertheless, I still have a long way to go. For the next 5 minutes, I stood AFK at the creeper farm, where I farmed 2 stacks of gunpowder, and finally crafted enough rockets again. Next, I took most of my farmed ores, which was about a shulker box, and built a fat lump of ore. Looks really cool, I have to say. These were all the ores I think I had from the 300 days. Then I dismantled all the fun, which was really satisfying, but took a really long time. In the end, it all came to an end. Yes, it's definitely not a small amount. I felt like continuing to build my city again, so I packed all the blocks into a shulker box and briefly terraformed the place where the house would stand. Then I marked the rough outline of the house and started building it straight away. As you can see, it was in the same style again, but I think it will look cool in the end when there are similar houses everywhere. The next thing I planned to do was build a farm for mob heads. I wanted to collect a lot of them, but when I lost the shulker box where all my mob heads were in, I completely lost sight of the goal. Now, I finally wanted to continue, so I first prepared all the items for it and then looked for a suitable place nearby. Then building the farm could begin. First, I dug the hole for the collection point, and then the spawn platforms for the monsters, skeletons, and of course the creepers. Then the dispensers were filled with water, and the bottom floor was equipped with trapdoors so that only creepers could spawn there. The collection point was then completed with water, and I then pulled up the wall all around. Next, the elevator was built all the way to the top, and then the final construction was made there. All I had to do was finish the elevator with kelp, where a creeper just exploded inside me, and a totem had to be used. Thank God no other person came along, otherwise that would have been it. I illuminated everything around, and the farm was finished. Now I just had to wait until the next storm came. I went to see how much my various farms had brought in so far, and a little came together on the honey farm. A lot was completely disrupted on the food farm, and 1 or 2 cacti on the cactus farm. Then I once again made my way to the ocean monument and dried out completely until 818 day. Now I'm almost halfway there, and the goal is definitely in sight. I've already built a nice nether portal in the overworld, but I'm still missing the nether hub in the nether. So I decided to tackle that as my next project. I first dismantled the portals and then started hollowing out a huge room. I rounded it straight away, and after a while, both pickaxes were almost broken, so I quickly flew to the gold farm and repaired them and made additional gold in the process. I think I'll use the farm more often for XP now, so I can get the extra gold. Then I started designing an entrance. I still needed some resources, so I collected enough warped wood, these warped leaves, some basalt blocks, and finally blackstone. I was now able to continue working on the design, and then I mined thousands of nether blocks again. It should be a nice hemisphere upwards like in my theme room, so I marked it roughly and then started pulling basalt up in one corner. I wanted to make a steep transition to the ceiling and make it look like some kind of rock was hanging in here. In any case, I had imagined it would be much easier than it was ultimately feasible, and I was on the verge of despair because I just couldn't get any further. Luckily, my pickaxes were almost broken again, and I had to go and repair them. I then decided to take a little break from the nether hub and continue with my ocean monument. So for the next few days, I dried my sponges in the nether, pulled up smaller areas of sand, and then used the sponges to remove the water. At the end, I tore down some sand walls with torches, and I'll say it again, that's really satisfying. But the cool thing is that I'm almost halfway done now. This gave me the motivation to continue building my nether hub, and the first thing I did was take care of the transition to the ceiling. I wanted to represent the nether to its fullest, and that's why I brought in the different biomes and nether constructions, and I think it doesn't look that bad. Afterwards, I went to the basalt rocks, where I had a really hard time again, and what was really a complete cramp. Then I completely finished building one side, and it was time to do the same thing on the other 3 sides. Ghasts still spawn every now and then, which I was really afraid of because they wouldn't break anything. After a long time, I finally finished the lower area and went back to repairing my pickaxes. Then I got a shulker box, made a few more rockets, took soul sand with me, and then went back into the nether, where I took enough crimson wood, crimson leaves, and nether bricks. I then finished building the transition to the ceiling, which now looks really wild. I wanted to create a glass mist effect at the very top of the ceiling. And of course, I didn't have the glass for that. So I threw all my sand into the super oven and turned it on. Of course, that went much too slowly, and I would have had to wait forever until I had enough glass. So I flew to the ocean monument, where I took a lot of sand with me. Then, while all the sand was roasting in the ovens, I went and got the flour that was the right color for the glass, namely magenta. But I did it really smartly and put the flour back up in my house and spammed it with bone meal, because that just makes you get the same flour again. But that only works with these big flowers. This meant I quickly had the 2 dyes together, purple and magenta. I then set up a few more ovens in front of the kiln house to get the glass even faster. I quickly ran out of coal and built a small tower, which I immediately dismantled again. It took a while until the glass was finished, but when I almost had a shulker box of purple and magenta glass, I headed into the nether, where building the glass ceiling could begin. I alternated each layer between the glass and ended up with this effect. Looks nice, but the bedrock bothered me a bit. So what was I thinking with my little brain? Right, just destroy it. To do this, I stood AFK at the creeper farm for an extra 10 minutes and crafted almost a stack of TNT with the gunpowder. When I got to the ceiling of the nether, I started destroying one bedrock block after the other. And only after the whole stack of TNT was gone did I realize that it would take far too long until I had destroyed every single bedrock block above the glass. So I dropped the idea then. Then, for better or worse, I have to be content with the bedrock blocks over the glass. At the edges of the glass, I built a wooden wall with the crimson wood, which now makes the fog ceiling look a lot better. This is the finished version of the ceiling for now. Once I find a way to destroy bedrock blocks more quickly, they won't be a problem anymore. The next thing I planned to do was build a pumpkin and melon farm and combine it with the interior of the 2 new houses. You'll see what that means in a moment. But first, I freed up a lot of space under the houses where I could then build the farm. After a short while, it occurred to me that I could simply set up a beacon with button 2 and dismantle everything much faster. Well, sometimes it takes a while for me, but that's how I finished the room. Then I took care of all the redstone stuff I would need for the farm. And once I had that together, I built the first structure that works like this. The melon grows. The observer recognizes this and sends a redstone signal to the neighboring pistons, which then destroy the melon. Pretty simple construct that I built what felt like hundreds of times over the next few days. Of course, they also need a water source, which I installed everywhere. And finally, I built a glass wall and light sources in front of it. I was now finished with the melon side, so I immediately built the other side, namely the pumpkin side, where I accidentally planted melon seeds throughout. Unfortunately, I didn't come across it until the very end, so I corrected the mistake while I was building the glass wall in parallel. But I also placed the glass wall a block too close. I only came to it at the very end. So I was allowed to dismantle the whole thing again and rebuild a block next to it. The next thing I took care of was the collection point. The items are simply transported further down with water and a hopper, where I then built an item lift on 2 different sides. At first, only so far that it went over the ceiling, which I immediately built on top, and then the floor. I built it specifically so that you can still see the items that have been shot up. Then I built a floor in one of the houses, because I wanted the items to ultimately be viewed there. So I crafted some honey blocks and built the water flow exactly so that this is what came out in the end. The melons that I get through the farms end up sliding along this honey wall, and you can see them again and again, which I think is just brilliant. The same procedure took place at the other house, but I ran out of dark oak wood and had to go and get more. But then I finished building the floor and the ceiling and took care of the correct item transport so that the pumpkins glide along here in the end. That just looks nice. On the night of the 868th day, I farmed some dark oak wood again and also some spruce wood. Now I definitely had enough wood to start decorating the interior of the 2 houses. I covered the water flow with beautiful wood and arranged the house so that it looks reasonably nice and that the sliding melons come into their own. I think I succeeded to some extent. That was the first house, and I think you can feel comfortable inside. Immediately afterwards, I started with the interior of the pumpkin house, which was a little more difficult because I didn't know exactly where to put the stairs to the first floor. But then I built it right over the entrance and set everything else up. In the end, this is what came out. I think that looks okay too. What do you all mean? I then built a small storage area for the melons and pumpkins, and then this project was completed for the time being. Let's see how much I can expand the farm in the future. Now I had plans to do something that I had already started doing in the last 100 days, namely linking the gold farm to the piglin trading station. My idea was to just build the trading station up by the gold farm, so I did that first. Then came the hard part of transporting the piglins upstairs. I completely messed up and had to use a totem. After a while, I managed to get the piglin onto the bedrock ceiling and then tried to block him up using a staircase, but that didn't work. So I installed it briefly, brought enough rails from home, and built a roller coaster all the way to the top. The only stupid thing was that I didn't know that piglins can't sit in the minecart, and so it was all in vain. Well, I locked the piglin back up and built a secured path where the piglin couldn't fall down, all the way to the top. Then it was time to lure the first piglin up and then take him to his new home upstairs. Immediately afterwards, I got the second piglin and also successfully brought him to the trading station. Then all the fun could be dismantled. Now I was finally done with it and wanted to test the 2 farms, but the gold farm produces far too few gold tracks to be able to keep up with the piglin trading station. So I wanted to go get a crafting able and craft the gold agates to the gold han, but when I got home, I heard a thunderstorm. I've been waiting for this for a while, so I quickly flew to the modpot arm, activated it, and was able to test it for the first time. It's now really easy to get modpots, and I was really pleased that the farm is working so well. Unfortunately, the storm didn't last too long. Nevertheless, I got 5 creeper pots and 2 zombie pots. I then went back into the nether and let the 2 farms run for about 10 minutes. This time, in addition to a lot of XP, I also got a few stacks of gravel and a bit of obsidian. I definitely think it's nice. Next, I wanted to continue building my city. To do this, I started building the area where the next houses would be. Then I gathered the resources for it, and since I wanted to build something with acacia wood this time, and I didn't have any left, I walked away with a few stacks. Now I had everything together, and the building could begin. Finally, I took care of the interior and the lighting. The house or row of houses is planned as a separate storage facility for carrots or potatoes, for example, of which I have an absolutely excessive amount. Time to show you the building with shaders. I've left the Nether hub standing for some time now, and I wanted to finish it in just 900 days. The only thing I'm missing is the floor, where I also wanted to add a fog effect. But it costs an exorbitant amount of glass, and I didn't have nearly enough of it. So I flew to the ocean monument and took a lot of sand with me. In the end, I had 3 full Schalke boxes of sand, which I immediately put into the oven at home. I wanted to create the fog effect with black glass, so I also needed a lot of black dye, which unfortunately you only get from squid. So I stood at Guardian Farm for almost 20 minutes, where I occasionally went downstairs to collect the ink bags. This gave me over 3 stacks, and then I got 2 in the nether at the collection point. I then went into the nether to see how far down I had to build, and the shroom lights mark 1 layer of glass each. Yes, I still had a lot to do. I started by filling out an area I wanted to start with. That alone took 20 minutes. For the fog effect, you need a light block at the bottom, so I went farming glowstone for the next 10 minutes and started filling the area with it. The only problem was that I only got about half of it full, so I went to get glowstone again for 15 minutes, then finished building the floor with it, and the next thing I needed was black carpet to place over the glowstone. I then got it from the old warehouse, but unfortunately I only got half of it. I was simply missing a black dye, so I dismantled all of my portals that always spawn when I go back from the nether because I needed the obsidian for the next farm, which was a squid farm. I collected all the other items and failed because of eggs. Yes, that's right, eggs. So I took care of trapping some chickens and building a measly chicken farm. This gave me a few more eggs, and in the meantime, a few pillagers just came at me. Of course, I took care of that straight away and started the raid on my own. It was close with 1 heart, and thank God only once, otherwise I had no problems. And as a reward, I got 5 totem and of course the hero of the village effect. Now I had everything together, and I looked for a suitable river nearby. But what happened next was just awesome. I found a skeleton horse, and it spawned a few more all at once. Unfortunately, 2 skeletons fought each other and killed 2 horses in the process. Luckily, I was able to defeat the remaining skeleton riders, and what was left were 2 awesome skeleton horses. I immediately got home some leashes and a saddle and successfully brought her home. How cool is that? Now I just have 2 skeleton horses. I continued looking for a river, and after a short time I decided on one that, from a future perspective, might not have been the best. Well, the first thing I started doing was drying out a 925 area. Then I started to mine further down, then flew home, took the beacon with me, and then continued mining there with haze 2 up to 45 here. Then I dried out a bit of the remaining river. That's when I realized that I hadn't chosen the best spot, because ideally squid should only be able to spawn in my farm and nowhere else in a river. Well, I continued to build solace on my farm and built 3 huge portals. Then I filled the gaps with water, where I also had to go to kelp farms in between, built the AFK pot, and then the collecting point in the nether. That's where I needed the eggs because I had to put a chicken in each of 4 boats, and I think that just looks funny. Anyway, I was now done testing the farm a bit, and well, what can I say? It kinda didn't work. So I tried to dry out some of the river, which was unfortunately hopeless because there was no time to do it. I was still a bit AFK and got whole 36 ink bags. Unfortunately, the farm was a disappointment for the time being, but I didn't let it get me down and still wanted to make the most of the rest of the time. The first thing I did with the few ink bags I still had was dye a sheep at the wool arm in black. Then all the sheep in my stable. I sheared them all night long, and with the wool, I went into the nether and started building the fog effect. I had almost 2 full shulker boxes of glass, and I didn't even finish the small area. At home, I took some black concrete powder, placed it near the sand farm, and stood AFK for about 5 minutes. Only then I realized that it wasn't working the whole time because I had forgotten to turn on the chunk loader. On the 898th day, I went to get some ink bags, made regular concrete out of black concrete powder, and sheared my sheep in between. Then I made some black glass again and went into the nether with it, where I finished building the small area. Yes, it was good. I didn't have enough glass again. I really wanted to do that for the 900 days. So I farmed a few squids, which really surprised me that you could get so many so quickly, and crafted glass with them. This time I finally had enough, and I completely finished building the small area. Looks really nice. I'm looking forward to when the entire nether hub is finished. Then the 900 day was here, and as always I wanted to use the last day for your name requests. That's what the new dog baby is called, Water, the cat in the Ontreek, one iron golem Tiag, and the other Dave the biggest. Now I only had one thing left to do, and when I did that, the 900 day was already over. That was it. I survived 900 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying. Friends of the Sun, We start here again one last time before the 1,000 days. It was the 901 day, and I still had a lot to do. The first thing on my list was to fix the squid farm. Well, what does repair mean? I still had to dry out the river chunks nearby. The procedure was the same as for the ocean monument, and after I finished one side, I was the only one missing the other. On the night of the 904 day, I was finished and stood for 30 seconds to test AFK, and it was really relieving when I saw this sight here. Next, I went to repair my things at the piglin farm and dry out all the sponges, then stood at the creeper farm for about 5 minutes, which I used to craft enough rockets, and then I was able to go to the ocean monument to continue mega project. I still had a lot to do, but I was confident that I would be able to do it in the 1,000 days. After an hour, I really didn't feel like it anymore, but continued the next day for an hour and a half. On the 913 day, I had had enough, but I definitely came far. At home, I threw a lot of sand into the oven because I would also need the glass for the nether hub, but I didn't want to tackle it until later. Now I felt like building something again. To do this, I prepared all the blocks, then built an area behind the warehouse, and construction could begin. In case you're wondering what that's supposed to be, it's a little wizard, as you might see by his staff, his hat, or his cloak. I definitely find him really cool. With shaders, it also looks really mystical. Then another idea came to mind. What if the little wizard also has his own magical forest? I wanted to tackle this as my next project, and when I saw that I had almost no dark oak saplings left, I flew straight into the forest and felled countless trees the next day. As a result, I not only got a lot of wood, but also 2 stacks of saplings. Back home, I got straight to work on the project and started terraforming the area for the forest. While I was placing the earth, I noticed how nice it would be for the city if there was a small magical forest next to it. Maybe you also have ideas about what else could be built for such parts of the city. I then ran out of soil and had to go nearby to get more. And it always feels weird to farm soil. Well, I finished terraforming the forest area by 918 day. Now it was time to add the forest. That's why I got the saplings and started placing one thick tree after the other. Yes, the 2 stacks definitely weren't enough, and I didn't even get close to finishing it. I imagined it a little differently, but it didn't help, and I flew back into the forest, where I spent half an hour just building trees and then collecting the saplings. This gave me a little more than 3 stacks, which I then planted again, one after the other. Not even the second series was finished, and I was really worried about how long I would have to go to Zeppelin's farm. In the meantime, I blacked another sheep in the flock and noticed my super stove was starting to run out of fuel. This was the perfect time to build another farm, a blaze farm. So I got enough yellow flowers and prepared all the remaining items for them. Once I had everything, I took a quick trip to my hoglin farm and took enough food with me. Now I had arrived at the blaze burner and building the farm could begin. Relatively simple construct. Finally, all I had to do was place lava on all 4 corners and add a vine in the middle, and the farm was finished. I tested them straight away for 10 minutes, and the result was 4 or 5 stacks of wage rods, which in terms of burning power would be equivalent to almost 7 stacks of coal. I immediately filled the super oven with it and wanted to continue with the nether hub. To do this, I briefly went to shear my black sheep and used all the black dye to make black glass. When I got close, I immediately cleared another area, covered the wall with black concrete, started the floor again with light and carpet, and then built the fog effect. But since I still had more than enough glass left, I wanted to continue straight away, so I continued. Unfortunately, I ran out of light blocks and rugs, so I could only do a small portion. I was still satisfied. The goal was in sight here too. Back home, I had the brilliant idea that I could simply cut down the leaves and even do it with my hoe that had Fortune 3 on it. When I tried it and realized that it would be 1,000 times faster, I just felt so stupid. Why didn't I think of this much sooner? I was completely annoyed, but at least I figured it out. And so I spent the next quarter of an hour just taking down leaves, and holy, that was a lot quicker than before. In that short time, I collected almost 7 stacks of saplings. Hopefully that would be enough, and I would plant 1 tree at a time again. On the night of the 927 day, I was finished. And if you're wondering why I left extra space in the middle, yes, you'll find out now. I wanted to build something cool there that would fit in with this magic forest theme, a kind of magic cauldron. I went to get some glowstone and prepared the rest of the things. But then I started building it. I think it looks pretty nice. I then went to repair my things at the gold farm and got a few last saplings, while a thunderstorm started. So I immediately flew to the mob head's arm, activated it, and spent the next few minutes picking up a few heads. I ended up getting exactly 10, and my collection expanded again. I placed the last trees, and now it went to the ground. I didn't want to just leave it made of grass, so I placed moss everywhere, which I think fits the magical forest much better. I then took care of some lighting, and now there was only one thing missing: the beacon that is mixed in the cauldron. To do this, I scraped together all my gold reserves from my storage, took a beak with me, and set up the whole magic under the cauldron. I activated it, and it was ready. You can even see how the color changes slightly at the beginning. Now I was finished with the magic forest and can present it to you with shaders. I then multiplied my black sheep so that I would get even more black wool from time to time. Then it was back to my biggest project so far, the ocean monument. This time I was motivated to finish it. Here in the first time lapse, I spent almost 2 hours drying out, and it really motivated me to see that I was getting closer to the goal step by step. The next real-life ag had arrived, and the grind continued. Day and night, I simply raised more sand walls and conjured the water away. The closer I got to the middle, the more annoying it became with the guardians, and 1 or 2 times they even hit me on low life. Another 2 hours passed, and I finally did it. The ocean monument was successfully dried out from the outside. I'm telling you, I was very happy, but I still had to remove all the shenanigans that were still in the air everywhere and the sand walls. I went home again, took enough torches and 2 empty shulker boxes with me, and then the fun could begin. To be honest, I thought it would be relatively quick, but it ended up taking over an hour. Now the whole thing looked much nicer, and there was only one last thing missing. The ocean monument also dries out from the inside. At times it was a complete cramp, and oftentimes it was really close. After 2 days, I managed to do this, and I was finally finished with my ocean monument mega project. At least for now, I think there's still something to come for you. Well, I still had to bring the things back, and while I was doing that, I noticed that there were a few slime chunks right here, so I killed a few and took a few slime balls with me. Then I packed about half of all the sand into the shulker boxes and made my way home. Then everything was baked in the super oven, as I would still need a lot of glass for the nether hub. I then noticed that the fuel was already running out, so I went into the nether, where I made a quick detour to Hoglin Farm, and then I looked for Blaze Farm. I had forgotten where exactly I had built them, and was at 3 fortresses in total, where, thank God, the third one was right, and I found the farm. I then farmed there until I had a stack of blaze rods, which should definitely be enough for the sand. Next, I fled to my squid arm, where I stood AFK for 10 minutes, and holy, I wasn't expecting so many ink sacs. So the farm works really well. With this, I was able to make 2 full shulker boxes with black glass and then black concrete odor, which I immediately turned into normal concrete, while of course I was constantly shearing the black sheep for wool. The only thing missing was glowstone. I farmed that for the rest of the 953 day, and then I was finally able to continue building at the nether hub. But I quickly ran out of glowstone and black carpet, so I just built the glass a little more and mined thousands more netherrack blocks. On the 958 day, the end was really in sight. At home, I made a few decks of black concrete, got a lot of black wool, and crafted my last shulker boxes with black and glass. Then I farmed 20 minutes glowstone again. Hopefully now I've had enough of everything, and I mined thousands of netherrack blocks for the last time and placed the black concrete. When I was finished with that, I continued with placing the glowstone, which unfortunately just didn't work out. Well, I continued with the carpet, where I got even less far than with the glowstone. So I then dyed my white wool at home and placed it over the remaining glowstone. I still needed some of that, so I quickly got it and used it to fill the rest of the area. We continued with the glass, which took another day. Now I was finally done with the floor and the fog effect, and I'm more than happy that I pulled it off. Unfortunately, the nether hubber wasn't finished yet. I still had to repair the small inconsistencies in the ceiling. I have no idea why I didn't do this sooner. The last thing left was this area here above the gates. I came up with an idea pretty quickly, so I prepared concrete blocks in the colors, and then placed one at each gate. I cleaned up the rest of the nether hub and took all the items with me in shulker boxes. Then the nether hub was finally finished. Now you can view it with shaders. Friends. What was just around the corner was the most difficult challenge of the entire 1000 days. The last advancement I was missing. How did we get here? To do this, the first thing I had to do was transport a shulker into the overworld, so I equipped myself with the necessary resources and went towards the end, where I briefly enjoyed my hot end portal. In Endun, I looked for the closest end city, where there is also one of these small portals nearby. When I found my final city, I immediately brought my first shulker player into a boat. Then, it was a matter of building a railway from there to the nearest portal, and also an area at the exit, so that when shulker comes through, I spent about 20 minutes with the void, and the journey for the shulker could begin. At the right end, I had to build the recovery point where I accidentally fell in, and the route there, and the moment of truth had come. I was so stupid and thought it would be teleported through the portal straight away and jumped in straight away. Even though, of course, I still had to destroy the bread, and I actually managed to successfully bring shulker into the overworld. Of course, that wasn't enough. I had to repeat a few tracks, build a route to my chosen little island, and then transport the shulker there. For you, this is a small compilation. For me, it was the complete cramp, and that is by no means an exaggeration. Anyway, the end product was this, shulker locked up in a little glass house. The next mob effect I would need was Favor of the Dolphin. To do this, I got 2 dolphins and simply attached them to a line. The only problem was that I didn't give them a name X'd, and since I briefly got blocks for the beacon, they unfortunately spawned. But then I took some from home with me, briefly enlarged a beacon, and then got 2 new dolphins, which this time I gave very creative names. The next effect I had to prepare was Sea Power, which you get from a conduit. Of course, I already had the Heart of the Sea. I just needed enough Nautilus shells. I knew that wandering traders trade these sometimes, and that one was near my final portal, so I flew there at random, and I was completely lucky, and he actually offered some. Of course, I crafted the conduit straight away, and then set it up right next to the island, which gave me the effect. For the construction, I was missing one item in particular that I had never owned before, a wither rose. You get this when a wither kills a peaceful mob. So I flew to my wither skeleton arm and quickly got 6 heads. But it was night, so I prepared the items for another farm. A turtle arm, because I also needed the turtle egg urge, and I didn't have any of these horn shields. During the day, I flew away a bit and spawned the wither in a meadow where there were lots of animals. I then had a few of them slaughtered by wither and got a few wither roses. In fact, the fight afterwards was a bit closer, but of course I defeated him. For the turtle arm, I got some seaweed, then looked for a suitable place for it and started building it. The only problem was that unfortunately no turtles spawned there, so I placed my turtle eggs there, but they took days to hatch. During the night, I flew to a few small islands in the hope that I would find turtles there, but unfortunately that didn't work. I then looked through my entire warehouse again to make sure I really didn't have any of these horn signs. And no, unfortunately, I didn't. I thought it wouldn't work anymore. But after a bit of research, I realized that it could be done quite easily without the urge of the shield size master. Well, the farm was unnecessary for now, but maybe I'll need it again. Who knows? Next, I prepared the ingredients for brewing, since I still had to brew almost every potion. I even got extra mushrooms for this, and one thing that was also very important was the strange soup with this special white flour, as that is the only way to get the blindness effect. Afterwards, I stood at the creeper farm for a few minutes because I needed all the potions and throwers, and of course, the black powder was necessary for that. Now my brewing career began, and I brewed almost every single potion like a magician. Of course, this happens directly at the turtle farm so that the eggs can start to hatch. It was difficult to keep track of everything, but on the night of the 974 day, I was finished, and one of the turtle eggs even cracked. Back on the island, I changed the placement of the beacons and finished building the structure. For the third beacon, which I now needed from level 2, I had to dissolve my emerald beacon a bit, but this meant that I was able to get the 3 effects of haste, resistance, and bounce from the beacons. The very last thing I had to prepare now was a dispenser with spectral arrows, because that gives that cool glowing effect. Now I was finally finished, but suddenly both of my dolphins were gone. I don't know why. But I got 2 new ones, again with a creative name. On the night of the 975 day, I looked for an ocean monument nearby that still had the Elder Guardians inside so I could get the mining fatigue effect from them. Now I was finally fully prepared and the experiment could begin. The first thing I had to do was get the Bat Omen effect at a villager outpost. With this effect, I flew to my home and started a raid. After firing a few arrows and raising swords, I won this raid and got the Hero of the Village effect. Unfortunately, the Bat Omen effect goes away, so I flew back to the villager outpost and got it back. The next thing in line was the mining fatigue effect, so I fled to the ocean monument, grabbed it quickly, and quickly made my way to the island. There, I had to lose some hunger for a moment, but then I was ready, and the attempt began. Yes, unfortunately, I screwed up because I was missing the glowing effect of the arrow and the slowness effect. Well, the first attempt was unfortunately a disappointment, so I briefly caught a pufferfish and the second attempt could begin. I still had Hero of the Village and Bad Omen, so all I had to do was get mining fatigue and then go through the whole process on the island. But I had forgotten about losing hunger, and so, unfortunately, I couldn't eat the pufferfish, which made the second attempt fail. To my surprise, the Shaka ox had also killed itself, and I was completely frustrated. Well, it was stupid, but as always, giving up wasn't an option. I crafted a few more rails and went back to the end, where I picked up another Shaka. Again, I had to shoot her out of the boat at the end portal and bring her into a Minecraft in the overworld. Then drive to just before the island and just put the Shaka in a boat. Then I wanted to lead her to her place. And what happened next was just bitter. The Shaka killed itself before we even arrived. So I got another one, and in the overworld instead of one, there were suddenly 3 Shaka players, and it was a total hassle to take at least one with me. Worried that she would also kill herself, I threw a regeneration potion and then successfully guided her to the right spot. Now everything was prepared again, and on 980 day, I flew to another villager outpost, got the Bad Omen effect, and started the raid at my place, where things were often tight. But after a while, I got the Hero of the Village effect, and then the Bad Omen effect again. The next thing was, logically, the mining fatigue effect. Then the next attempt on the island could begin. Yes, unfortunately, I didn't make it this time either. The dolphin effect was missing. 1 pufferfish caught and mining fatigue effect later, the last attempt of the day started. Yes, this time I actually managed it, and I was really happy. I also have to say, I was a little bit proud of myself. I have now completed the most difficult achievement there is in Minecraft. I still had a little time, so I decided to expand my city. To do this, I first felled a spruce tree and went to mine some deep slate. Then I had to install the shulkers at the spawn, because otherwise it would have been impossible to build anything there. When the shulkers stopped being annoying, I terraformed the space for the house and construction could begin. During this, I realized that I had forgotten an important block, namely white concrete. I grabbed it briefly and the building could continue. I was only finished with the outside area. The only thing missing was the interior design. That's why I took care of it from the 989 tag to the 991 tag and tried to set it up in a more modern way this time. For 1000 day, I wanted to prepare a fireworks show, and for that, I needed lots of colors. That's why I collected 1 or 2 flowers in this flower biome. Back at home, out of interest, I took a look at how much the melon and pumpkin colors had earned me, and apparently a lot has come together. Of course, you need a lot of gunpowder for the fireworks, so I stood AFK at the creeper farm until the night of 993 and got my hands on 15 stacks. I spent the next 20 minutes crafting lots of different fireworks and preparing a structure for the show. I still had a few last days to do something. Another film room was announced. To do this, I briefly flew to an End D to take another closer look. At home, I took all the items I would need, and the final film could be built. When I was finished, I wasn't completely satisfied and wanted to change the ceiling. So I got black and light gray concrete and wanted to use it to recreate the sky or the void in the end, and I think that makes the room much more interesting now. Since I finished the theme room so quickly, I decided to build another one. This time, I went into the jungle to take a closer look, because it was supposed to be a jungle room. Back at home, I stole all the items and started building the next theme room. On the 999 day, I was finished. Oh yeah, I promised to give a reward of 50 to the person who correctly guesses the number of film rooms I will have after 1,000 days. These 6 people guessed correctly. Whoever writes me their Discord name first in the comments wins the 50. Anyway, it was the night of the 999 days, and I have to say, I was a little sad that the journey of the 1,000 days was slowly coming to an end. I wanted to take another look at everything important that I have already done in this world. Starting with my starting base, the first stable, the first and still only bridge, the trading room, my very first camp, my snowman from day 362, the castle with the diamond beacon, the ruins with the chapel, all theme rooms, the hot air balloon, the small sand hut with the cactus farm underneath, the little town I built. Oh man, I'm really looking forward to finishing building it. Then, the overly large Nether Hub and the Ocean Monument, which I'm also excited to see how I'll transform that in the future. And last but not least, the final dream, which for me is the most epic of all. I created all of this with a lot of inspiration over the last 1,000 days, although that wasn't even all. Just how many farms I still built. Without you viewers, I would never have done this. And I wanted to thank you again for the excessive support, regardless of whether you are a silent spectator or not. Thanks. It was already the 1,000 day, and as always, I had one more important thing to do. As of today, the counter was 4 digits. Then it was time for graduation. I watched the fireworks with one teary eye and one smiling eye, but just making it this far makes me really proud. One last time I can say that was it. I survived 1,000 days in Minecraft Hardcore without dying.